15 years ago, I ended my marriage because I found out my husband was cheating with a childhood friend and even had a child with her. This made me very upset and almost made me quit my job. But during that tough time, my current husband helped me and we made a happy home together. However, my happiness didn't last long. Recently, I saw my ex-husband for the first time in 15 years. He said mean things to me, like I must still be single because nobody would want to marry someone like me who couldn't have kids, but I surprised him by introducing him to my children. When I introduced my son, my ex-husband was shocked and scared. I told him about my life now. I'm Florence, 38 years old. I live with my 13-year-old son Max, my 11-year-old daughter Ava, and my husband David, who is the same age as me. Max is in middle school and going through a rebellious phase. He can be cheeky sometimes, but my husband David knows how to handle him. Ava loves makeup and fashion, and she knows how to get what she wants because she's the youngest and a girl. Max really cares about Ava, so when she jokes about not liking him if he's not nice to me, he quickly apologizes and promises to be good. He's charming and always knows how to make things fun. So, even though my life is busy, it's also full of joy. But there's something people might not know about me. I've been divorced once and am now happily married for the second time. I got divorced because my ex-husband, who I'll call Jack, did something really hurtful. It happened 15 years ago when we were both in college. We were happy together at first, talking about how much we wanted kids and imagining what it would be like to be parents. But even after trying for a while, we didn't get pregnant. Every month, when my period came, it caused tension between us. We tried to figure out why we couldn't have kids, spending a lot of money on treatments, but doctors couldn't find anything wrong. Despite this, my husband started getting frustrated and blaming me for our infertility. He'd say things like, "When will I ever become a father?" and make sarcastic comments that made me feel bad. He stopped helping around the house, saying it was my job because I couldn't have kids. He made me feel like our marriage was pointless because I couldn't fulfill my role as a woman. Afterwards, my husband's words got meaner. He'd say things like, "My sister's having her second baby already. Isn't that great? They're on their second, and we haven't even had our first." He'd look at me with a harsh expression, making fun of me and putting me down. He'd say, "If your body was normal, we have kids by now." I'd try to defend myself, saying we didn't know the reason for our infertility yet, but he'd just say, "It's always the woman's fault for not having babies. If I knew you couldn't have kids, I wouldn't have married you. You should feel guilty." His words hurt me a lot. On top of that, my in-laws would call, excitedly asking when they get a grandchild. At first, I'd try to brush it off, saying it takes time, but it didn't help. My mother-in-law started blaming me, saying I was useless for not having kids yet, especially since my sister-in-law had kids so easily. The pressure from them was overwhelming. One day, my friend Daisy invited me out. Jack, my ex-husband, had been busy with work, so he wasn't around much. That's when Daisy told me something shocking. She said, "I've been wanting to talk to you for a while. I have something important to tell you, Florence. I've missed you too." "What's up, Daisy?" "Remember Grace? She was Jack's childhood friend. They grew up near each other and their families were close. She went to the same college as us and now works with me. Grace, the daughter of the CEO at my job, got her position through family connections. We didn't really hang out in college since we were in different groups, and even at work, we didn't talk much because we worked in different departments. My husband introduced me to her once, calling her his friend and asking me to get along with her. But Grace didn't seem to like me, so I avoided her. Daisy, my friend, told me something surprising about Grace. She said, "I think your husband and Grace are having an affair." I couldn't believe it. Daisy had seen them holding hands, not just like friends. "Are you sure?" I asked. "I think you should find out more," Daisy said, offering to help me talk about it. I had suspected Jack was cheating. He'd always come home late, saying he had to work more. He was never around on weekends, busy entertaining clients. Even though I had a feeling, I tried to ignore it. But after hearing Daisy's warning, I went straight to a detective agency. I wanted proof of his infidelity. Within a week, they had enough evidence. But I wasn't ready to divorce him yet. Despite everything, I still remembered the promises we made to each other. I needed time to decide. A few days later, I got home to find Jack sitting at the dinner table, which was unusual because he usually came home late. "Oh, you're home. I thought you'd be late again," I said sarcastically. "Yeah, sorry about that. "I need to talk to you," he replied. Knowing about the affair, I braced myself for bad news. "I want a divorce," he said. "What?" I was shocked. I realized he wasn't just fooling around, he was serious about Grace. "Grace is pregnant. I'm going to marry her," he added. I couldn't believe it. He had always said Grace was just a friend. Jack didn't seem to think he did anything wrong. He even said, "My mom wants me to divorce you. She thinks Grace is better because she's prettier and can have kids." Hearing this hurt a lot. Tears filled my eyes as Jack left, saying he was going back to Grace. I was too hurt to stop him. Later, I got divorce papers in the mail, with a note from Grace asking me to divorce Jack. It felt like a slap in the face. I wanted to say, "No, you're the one who took my husband." But I realized arguing wouldn't change anything. I was left with so many questions. Why was I being blamed? I couldn't just accept the divorce quietly. Determined to stand up for myself, I used the evidence I gathered from the detective agency to start divorce mediation. A few days after filing, I got a call from an unknown number. When I answered, I heard Grace, Jack's mistress, yelling at me. She was furious that I had started a lawsuit. I calmly explained that it was the right thing to do given the situation and that I knew about her inappropriate behavior. She demanded compensation, even though she was pregnant. Her harsh words hurt me deeply. I told her we could discuss everything officially during the divorce mediation. In the mediation, the court recognized Jack and Lee's relationship as infidelity based on the evidence. Jack tried to blame my infertility. The court didn't buy it because there was no proof of my infertility within just a year of marriage. In the end, I received $220,000 as alimony from Jack and $110,000 from Grace. After finalizing the divorce, I hoped to move on, but the aftermath was far from over. The affair between Jack, Grace, and me became gossip among our friends, especially since we all went to the same university. Shockingly, some rumors suggested I hid my infertility and tricked Jack into marrying me. Some friends even sympathized with Jack and Grace, which felt awful. The situation got worse at work because Lee, Grace's father, was my company's president. Grace portrayed herself as a victim, spreading lies about me hiding my infertility and demanding alimony while she was pregnant. Despite trying to ignore it, I faced backlash at work. My bosses favored Grace because of her influential family, and I was sidelined from important projects. Eventually, I felt forced to resign. While job hunting, another company recognized my skills and offered me a position. Here, I thrived beyond expectations. My new boss valued me for my abilities, unlike my previous workplace, which favored nepotism. I found myself drawn to this boss, who turned out to be my current husband, David. David was my rock during the tough times after my breakup with Jack. We spent a lot of time together, talking about everything from work to personal matters, and our bond grew into love. When David proposed, I was thrilled, but I was also scared of facing infertility again. I confessed this fear to him, and he reassured me, saying that he loved me no matter what and that having children wasn't the most important thing to him. Feeling truly happy and loved, I decided to marry David. Shortly after our wedding, we were blessed with our first child, Max, followed by our daughter, AITA. Despite the challenges of parenting, we were content and happy every day. Years later, at a friend's wedding, I unexpectedly saw my ex-husband for the first time in 15 years. I was startled to see him there, but then I remembered that the bride and groom were also our university friends, so it wasn't surprising that he was there too. I tried to ignore him as I walked by, but he called out to me loudly, catching my attention. "Hey, what's up?" Jack said loudly, possibly drunk, as he spoke to me. "Surprised to see you here, it's been a while. Looks like you've put on some weight, huh?" he added, spraying a bit as he talked. I silently rolled my eyes at his sarcastic comment. Then Jack called over his family, including Grace and her son. Grace laughed when she saw me and joked, "Wow, it's been ages. Have you been stress eating? You've gained some weight, huh? Life's been a roller coaster, hasn't it? And still no luck with having kids, right? Tough luck, huh?" Their rude comments left me speechless with shock. Then I noticed Grace's son blushing and looking down with embarrassment. He was quite handsome. I realized I hadn't introduced him yet. "This is my son," Grace proudly announced. "He's cute, right? Takes after me. And he's not just good looking, he's really smart too, a little genius. Looks like we're the only ones happy here, huh?" Jack and Grace laughed, proudly showing off their son. But I noticed something off about their son's expression. He seemed uncomfortable with his parents' behavior, growing increasingly dissatisfied with their mocking attitude. He must be a kind-hearted child, I thought to myself. But I didn't have time for them. Just as I was about to leave, Jack grabbed my arm tightly. "You divorced me because of infertility, yet you took money from us," he said, still holding on to a grudge from 15 years ago. Then Grace chimed in, "Yeah, you're infertile and single. Why do you need money? Families like us with children need it more. Give us back double the money you took." Their selfishness stunned me. Suddenly, Jack's son spoke up, pointing out, "Single means I'm married, right? But she's wearing a wedding ring on her left hand." Everyone's attention turned to my left hand, where I wore a wedding ring. Jack and Grace stared in shock. "You're married?" they exclaimed loudly, causing a scene. Feeling embarrassed by the scene Jack and Grace caused, I was unsure what to do. Suddenly, my son Max and daughter Ava appeared, concerned about my lateness. Ava, always outspoken, was joined by Max, who rarely spoke up so boldly. "Mom, you're late, and you have kids?" Max asked, surprising me with his directness. "Yes, I do. Let me introduce them. This is my son Max and my daughter Ava." Jack and Grace were shocked to see the children of the woman they thought couldn't have kids. Grace looked closely at my son, and after a moment, they began to speak in a more mature tone, though their voices sounded strained. They seemed curious about Max's uniform. "He came straight from school with my husband, so he's still in his uniform. And yes, he goes to that famous private middle school," I explained. "Max worked hard and wanted to try for it, so we let him take the exam. He passed and has been attending since this year." Indeed, Max excelled academically and was enrolled in a prestigious local school. "No way, he can't be your son," my daughter exclaimed, joining the conversation. "She plans to take the same school's exam next year," I added proudly. "Yeah, and Max is amazing. He won a violin contest," Ava chimed in. "Violin? I thought I recognized him. He was on TV recently," Grace exclaimed. "Oh, you saw that?" "Yes, he's been getting quite a bit of media attention lately. He was coming back from violin practice today," I explained. Grace and my ex-husband were speechless. "You were supposed to be infertile. How could you have children like this?" Jack protested. "We're all happy now, and that's what matters. Let's not involve each other anymore," I said firmly, ready to leave with my kids. Just then, my husband David arrived. Jack's face went pale at the sight of him. "Is your husband by any chance the young Mr. Lopes who became the president of Resident last year?" Jack asked, recognizing David. Indeed, David was the president of a company that had ties with Grace's father's firm. I had switched jobs and met David there. Last year, he was appointed as the president of the company, recommended by the then president. "Ah, I'm Lopez," my husband introduced himself, confused by the tense atmosphere. Sensing the tension, Max explained, "We heard these people calling Mom infertile and fat, so Ava and I came to help her out." I realized they must have overheard my ex-husband and his wife insulting me earlier. My husband's expression hardened as he realized the situation. "I heard rumors, but I didn't expect a lack of decency," he said firmly. Jack started making excuses, trying to flatter my husband, while Grace protested. They began arguing, and their son, who had been silent, finally spoke up. "Let's stop this already. It's terrible how you're talking about this lady, calling her fat and infertile, and demanding money back. It's embarrassing for me," he said tearfully. "And what's this about an affair? Am I a child born from an affair? Am I an unwanted child?" he continued, his voice full of anguish. Jack and Grace became visibly unsettled. "Oh well, it's not like that." Grace tried to defend herself, but she couldn't ignore the stares from the other guests. Blushing deeply, she looked down in embarrassment. Though I couldn't forgive Jack and Grace, I admired their son for his sense of justice and kindness. Wanting to support him, I was about to speak, but my husband spoke up first. "Thank you for standing up for my wife and defending her from insults. You're a kind child," my husband said, patting the boy's head. With a smile, I decided to speak up too. "But maybe I am a bit chubby. However, that's not the point. Actually, I'm pregnant," I announced, gently stroking my belly. I was already pregnant with our third child. At that time, I was on maternity leave. Turning to the tear-filled eyes of the boy, I continued, Your mom also nurtured you in her belly with great care. You're not an unwanted child. Your mom and dad love you and are proud of you, right? Looking at Jack and Grace, I waited for their response. The boy looked at them hopefully and asked, "Really?" Jack and Grace quickly nodded, assuring him, "Yes, yes. You're our pride. You're very important to us." Seeing the boy smile, I felt a sense of relief. "Let's get back to our seats for now." "It's a day of celebration," I suggested. Each family returned to their seats, and the chaotic scene came to an end. The wedding concluded successfully, and as we headed to the station, Grace and Jack approached us with their son, holding hands. Max and Ava had been protective of me, but my husband chuckled and calmed them down. Grace and Jack offered their apologies. "Sorry about everything. We truly regret our actions today." "Thank you for earlier," they said. It was the first apology I had received from them in 15 years. Perhaps having a child had changed them a bit. I just laughed and said, "Really? After all this time?" With that, I turned my back on them and began to walk away. Max offered to carry my bags, taking the one marked with maternity. Ava cheerfully dragged a coat over my shoulders. Despite their young age, they were looking out for me during my pregnancy. "All right, tonight's dinner will be Dad's homemade hamburgers, Max and Ava's favorite." "Thank you." I vowed to protect the smiles of my beloved family, leaving behind the pains of the past.
I was walking down the street at night after finishing my shift at a part-time job that I wasn't used to. Earlier in the day, my daughter-in-law Elena came back from shopping and made me help with the party preparations for an event I couldn't even attend, which made me twice as tired. But it was for my granddaughter Mina's celebration, and just imagining grandson Cleo being happy as a big brother kept me motivated. As I passed by the side of the house, I saw the lights were still on. I looked at the clock, and it was already past 9 p.m. It was time to put Cleo to bed. As I looked back at the house, I saw an unbelievable sight. There was Cleo, sitting alone in the yard, staring into the house. "Why is Cleo outside?" "Cleo! What's wrong?" As I ran up to him, he gave me a relieved smile, and then the next moment, his face crumpled, and he started to cry. "What happened? Why are you outside alone?" Cleo seemed like he wanted to say something, and then he spoke hesitantly. "Today is Mina's birthday. It's a family-only celebration, so I'm not allowed inside," he whispered as he cried. "What? That's ridiculous!" Unable to bear it, I silently took Cleo's arm and walked out of the gate. Something that shouldn't have happened, happened again. "You haven't eaten anything since lunch, have you? Grandma is also tired from work and hungry. Let's go get something delicious to eat." I tried to speak brightly in my usual tone to reassure Cleo. Cleo seemed to understand something and answered cheerfully. At the night restaurant, I left Cleo alone and stood up from my seat. Pretending to go to the drink corner, I took out my smartphone. "It's been a long time since I contacted her. I wonder if she'll answer." After a few rings, I heard an irritated voice say, "Hello?" I introduced myself and apologized for calling at this late hour, then briefly explained Cleo's situation. The person on the other end said, "I'll be there right away," and hung up. After a while, a woman entered the restaurant. I looked towards the entrance and raised my hand. She noticed me and quickly came over to our table. "Who?" Cleo looked up at her with a puzzled expression, and she hugged him, unable to hold back her tears. "Mom, is that you?" "My name is Molly. I'm 57 years old. My husband passed away a year ago, and I live in the house he left behind. Our family consists of 5 people, my son, his wife, and my 2 grandchildren. My son, Jeffrey, has been divorced, and his current wife, Elena, is his second wife. The older grandchild, Cleo, is from Jeffrey's previous marriage, so he has no blood relation to Elena or the younger grandchild, Mina. 3 years ago, Jeffrey returned to this house with Cleo after his ex-wife cheated on him. At that time, Cleo, who was only 2 years old, was emotionally unstable and constantly looked for his mother in this unfamiliar house. Seeing Cleo like that, I took great care of him, making sure he was comfortable. The following year, Jeffrey brought Elena to meet me. "Mother, I'm going to marry her," he announced suddenly, shocking me. So that's what he had been doing while he wasn't home much, busy with work and other things. Even though my biological son was emotionally unstable, he neglected him to have fun with someone else. I was so taken aback that I couldn't say anything to my own son. "And she's pregnant," he added, surprising me even more. "Sorry for the sudden news, but please take care of us," Elena said. "We thought it'd be easier to stay here since this house is big and has extra rooms." "That's all right, right?" Jeffrey asked with an audacious attitude. But how could I kick them out, knowing there was a child on the way? And so, our life together with my son's family and my grandchildren began. I don't know what Jeffrey's ex-wife was like since we lived apart, but Elena didn't do much housework. I saw her getting along well with Cleo, so she probably wasn't a bad person. However, she used her pregnancy as an excuse to leave all the housework to me. Honestly, I was working part-time, so I asked her to help out a little with the housework. "I have terrible morning sickness. My stomach is tight, and it's tough." She always had an excuse. Hearing that, I couldn't force her to do anything. Even though she looked perfectly healthy to me, I couldn't say anything because the difficulties of pregnancy vary from person to person. "I feel like I'm being pushed around." That's what I thought, but my husband, who used to listen to my concerns, was no longer with us. "She says she's having a hard time, so be more considerate. No one wants a strict mother-in-law these days. By the way, when's dinner ready?" When I talked to Jeffrey once, he just brushed it off with that. "Oh, I'm sorry for troubling you with such things." Every day was a struggle to keep my heavy heart in check. While we were living these days, Mina was born. When Cleo was born, we were living far apart, so I didn't get to see him much. Living with a baby nearby brings such happiness. Of course, that doesn't mean I love Cleo any less. Witnessing the birth of a new life made Cleo's eyes sparkle. The pride of becoming an older brother. He felt a sense of responsibility to protect his little sister. I could sense those feelings from him. I vowed in my heart to love both of these young ones equally, without comparing them. As Mina's upbringing began, Elena became increasingly harsh towards Cleo. Cleo was not her own child, and after giving birth to her biological daughter, Mina, her affection naturally shifted more towards Mina. Some women can become irritable postpartum, so I thought it was somewhat understandable. I could make up for it by supporting Cleo more. That's what I told myself, deciding to leave it alone, but Elena's behavior only worsened. Even so, Cleo probably wanted to believe in the Elena who had been kind to him before. He would volunteer to help out and try to gain her favor. One day, when I returned home from my morning part-time job, I could hear Elena's yelling from outside. "Why can't you even do this right? You've just made more work for me." It seemed she was scolding Cleo. When I went to check, I saw that Cleo had tried to make Mina's formula and had spilled the milk powder all over. Now. He's just a child, there's no need to get so angry. It's the thought that counts, right? I tried to calm Elena down. This is no place for you to talk. If you're going to that, instead clean that formula that's all over the floor. She snapped back. The feeling of being yelled at by a mother, even if she is not his biological mother, is indescribable for a child. Sadness, frustration, regret. Seeing Cleo with tears in his eyes, holding back all these emotions, filled me with pity. I'll clean this up, Cleo. You did your best. I hugged Cleo, comforting and calming him down, before cleaning up the milk powder that had scattered all over the floor. Mina, don't make clumsy mistakes like your brother. Your brother is completely useless. Elena said, looking down at us and then addressing Mina, who couldn't even understand her words yet. I struggled to contain my anger towards Elena, who ignored Cleo entirely. At dinner that evening, Cleo was nowhere to be seen, so I asked Elena, "Where's Cleo?" "I don't know. Maybe he ran away because I scolded him." Elena responded nonchalantly. "There's no way that's true. Cleo is only 4 years old. Where could he possibly run away to?" Just then, Jeffrey came home. "Jeffrey, I can't find Cleo anywhere," I said to him. "He's a boy. Maybe he went to the park nearby." "Anyway, Mina, I'm home," he replied, showing no concern. "Even if he is a boy, it's already past 7 p.m. Even if he went to the park alone, wouldn't that worry him?" While the two of them started eating the dinner I had prepared, I rushed outside. I searched the nearby park, the route to his kindergarten, and the supermarket we often go to. But Cleo was nowhere to be found. Maybe he's back home by now, I thought as I returned home and reached for the front door, but then I heard a metallic clanging sound coming from the yard. Our yard isn't very big, but we have a small garage. The sound seemed to be coming from there. No, it can't be, that's impossible. I approached the garage cautiously. I heard the sound of someone knocking on the door and a faint voice. "Cleo! Is that you, Cleo?" I flung the door open, and there was Cleo, sitting with his face swollen from crying, sobbing quietly. "This is just too cruel." I picked Cleo up and rushed to the two people who were likely eating dinner. Seeing my furious face, they exchanged uneasy glances. "What is the meaning of this?" I demanded, still holding the softly crying Cleo. "Well, I just found out from Elena," Jeffrey stammered. I shot him a sharp look before turning to Elena, who showed no remorse and said, "It's Cleo's fault. He ruined Mina's milk." What are these two talking about? Do they lock a small child in the garage for a small mistake? How could they sit and eat dinner, pretending nothing happened after hearing that? I couldn't help but raise my voice. "What are you saying? You're the one who made this little child try to prepare the milk. Even so, this is too much. Elena, don't you have any sense of responsibility as a mother?" My outburst made Jeffrey intervene. "Calm down, Mom. Elena is exhausted from taking care of Mina. Cut her some slack. If you knew about it, you're just as guilty. Locking a 4-year-old in a small, dark place like that." I couldn't finish my sentence. "I did try to stop her, thinking it was too much," Jeffrey added defensively. Jeffrey seemed to be trying to place all the blame on Elena. Elena shot a glare at him. "Before stopping her, you should have let Cleo out. Are you even his father?" Facing the two who had fallen silent, I gave them one more warning. "If something like this happens again, you'll both have to leave this house." "But that's..." Jeffrey stammered, while Elena, head bowed, refused to meet my gaze. Having said that much, I hoped this would never happen again. Ignoring the two, I took Cleo to the bath, gave him a reheated dinner, and tucked him into a warm bed. During all this, Cleo kept defending them. "It was my fault, Grandma. I made Mom angry. It's not her fault. Dad just got home and was tired and hungry." The more he tried to protect them, the more it broke my heart. I resolved to keep a close eye on their actions from then on. Although the two never apologized, I was more concerned about Cleo's well-being. Despite what he had gone through, Cleo continued to be helpful around the house, never losing his smile. Whether it was my constant vigilance or genuine remorse, there were no further harsh incidents toward Cleo. Although Elena sometimes made Cleo do excessive chores and was occasionally harsh, Cleo would say, "Grandma, I'm fine. I want to help Mom. And I love Mina. I'm the big brother, so I have to be responsible." With such earnestness, I couldn't bring myself to intervene. Interfering too much might worsen Elena's mood, potentially leading to more harsh treatment of Cleo. I wanted to avoid that at all costs. Despite my concerns, the two's treatment of Cleo gradually returned to how it was before Mina was born. Relief and peace returned to our household. I eventually felt at ease and resumed our usual routine. 2 months had passed since that dreadful incident. Life had been calm and peaceful. One day, my manager at the part-time job asked me to change my shift. Normally, I worked only in the mornings, but they couldn't find enough staff for the evening to closing shift. After Cleo's incident, I had reduced my working days. Being unable to refuse, I agreed to the shift change. "Oh? Molly, aren't you going to your part-time job today?" Noticing me at home during my usual working hours, Elena asked curiously. "I had a shift change today, so I'm working from the evening. So, you'll need to handle dinner tonight," I replied. Elena made a face, clearly annoyed, but then her expression brightened as if she had an idea. "Well then, since it's a special occasion, why don't we celebrate Mina's birthday a bit early tonight?" Elena exclaimed, knowing full well I wouldn't be home because of my part-time job. Clearly, I wasn't invited to this party. I, too, wanted to celebrate my dear grandchild's first birthday. "All right, I need to start preparing for the party right away. I'll tell Jeffrey to come home early too." Elena, oblivious to my feelings, seemed delighted. "Molly, I'm going shopping, so please look after Mina. Since you can't join the party, at least do that much." Using the shopping trip as an excuse, she was giving me some time alone with Mina. How selfish can she be? I was tired of arguing, so I took Mina and let Elena go shopping. That night, after finishing my shift at an unusual time, I walked home along the dark streets. Having helped Elena with the party preparations, despite not being able to participate myself, had doubled my fatigue. But thinking about celebrating Mina and seeing Cleo's happy face kept me going. As I walked past the side of the house, I noticed the lights were still on. It was already past 9 p.m. I needed to tuck Cleo in soon. "I hope they don't make me do the cleanup too," I thought. When I looked toward the house again, I couldn't believe my eyes. There, sitting alone in the yard, was Cleo, staring into the house. I couldn't understand why Cleo was outside. I quickly went around to the front gate and hurried into the yard. "Cleo! What's wrong?" When he saw me rushing towards him, he smiled with relief, but then his face crumpled, and he started crying. "What happened? Why are you outside alone?" I knew I shouldn't overwhelm him with questions, but I couldn't help it. Cleo just sobbed and clung to me, unable to speak. "Let's go inside, okay?" He looked at me with a surprised expression, as if wanting to say something. Then, in a voice full of apology, he whispered, "Today's Mina's birthday, but it's a family-only celebration, so I'm not allowed inside." He cried as he spoke. "This is unbelievable!" Unable to bear it any longer, I silently took Cleo's hand, led him out of the gate, and started walking. This shouldn't have happened again. "What's wrong, grandmother? Are you angry? Where are we going?" His anxious voice brought me back to my senses. "You've been outside all day without eating anything, right? And grandmother is tired from work and hungry too. Let's go eat something delicious. I tried to speak cheerfully, in my usual tone, to reassure Cleo. Sensing something, Cleo responded brightly. I was worried that people might look at us strangely for bringing a child to a restaurant at night. But neither the customers nor the staff seemed to care. Leaving Cleo alone at the table, I stood up. I'm going to get some juice. Pretending to go get some juice, I took out my smartphone. I haven't contacted them in a long time, but I hope they answer. After a few rings, a grumpy voice answered, "Hello?" I introduced myself and apologized for calling so late. I briefly explained Cleo's current situation. The person on the other end quickly said, "I'll be there right away," and hung up. When I returned to the table, Cleo was eating the fries we had ordered. "That took a while," he said, looking at me with concern while sipping the orange juice I placed on the table. "I couldn't decide what you might want to drink." I excused myself, but Cleo quickly brightened up. "I love orange juice," he said cheerfully and drank it down in one gulp. He's only 5 years old. Even at this late hour in a restaurant, he doesn't act excited. He sits quietly, waits patiently, and is mindful of others' feelings. Why does such a good child have to go through this? I felt a surge of frustration as I watched Cleo munch on his fries. After finishing his fries, Cleo seemed restless. "How about we order a hamburger too?" I suggested. Won't we get in trouble if we don't go home soon?" Cleo's expression was tense. Even though he said that, we couldn't go home just yet. I wondered how to explain it to Cleo. Just then, a woman entered the restaurant. I looked towards the entrance and raised my hand to signal her. The woman noticed and hurried over to our table. Cleo looked up at her with a puzzled expression, as if to say, "Who is this?" Unable to hold back her tears, the woman embraced Cleo tightly. The person I called earlier was Cleo's biological mother, Kaylin. "Mom," Cleo remembered. Jeffrey divorced Kaylin when Cleo was 2 years old, 3 years ago. Still, Cleo remembered his real mother. When he first came to our house, he was longing for her mother. And Kaylin, too, had never forgotten about Cleo for even a moment. After waiting for the two to calm down from their tears, I told Kaylin what had happened up until now. How Elena had been harsh to Cleo. How Cleo had been locked in the garage after spilling formula. And today, how she was thrown out of Mina's birthday party, being told she wasn't family. "I'm sorry. I should have watched her more carefully." "No. Molly, it's not your fault. You protected Cleo all this time, didn't you? And you called me." I had heard from Jeffrey that Kaylin had an affair, which was why they divorced, so I hesitated to call her. But it seemed the truth was different from what I imagined. "Because Kaylin is Cleo's real mother. I called you on such a simple thought, but was it a bother? I mean, do you have a new partner or family?" I asked hesitantly. Then Kaylin raised her voice. "No, I don't. I only ever wanted Cleo." What could this mean? When I told her the story I heard from Jeffrey about the divorce, Kaylin turned pale and began to speak. It was Jeffrey and that woman who had an affair. Looking sadly at Cleo, who had fallen asleep from exhaustion, Kaylin told me the truth. Jeffrey and Elena had started their relationship around the time Cleo was born. Then, suddenly, a man claiming to be a lawyer appeared in front of Kaylin. This man, claiming to be a lawyer, brought documents about Kaylin's affair and neglect of Cleo, talked about the divorce with Jeffrey, the compensation in the divorce trial, and the subsequent child support. Kaylin had no memory of such things, but had no one to rely on. She had lost her parents early and was completely alone. After marrying Jeffrey, she had become estranged from her friends. Being a housewife, she was always with baby Cleo, so even when she went out, her interactions with neighbors were just greetings. In such weak human relationships, it was difficult to gather evidence that she hadn't done anything. My vision darkened.
You could have relied on me.
But at that time, I was so shocked by Jeffrey's betrayal that I even doubted you, Molly. Kaylin confessed apologetically. I felt ashamed of my son's actions and hated myself for not keeping in closer contact with Kaylin at that time. I'm truly sorry. So, are you still paying that child support now? Yes. My parents left me a little money. Also, I reconnected with my previous workplace from before I got married. Somehow, I've been able to pay the child support without fail for Cleo's sake. I couldn't listen any longer. Unaware of any of this, I had been living peacefully with that couple. I don't know how to apologize enough. It's okay. Molly, you did nothing wrong. And now, I've finally met Cleo. That alone made paying the child support worthwhile. Kaylin's expression was calm. By the way, Cleo's custody does belong to Jeffrey, but you haven't been seeing Cleo? I brought up what had been bothering me all this time. As expected, Kaylin's face darkened. Not even once since the divorce was finalized until today. She answered in a small voice. How could this be? I couldn't contain my emotions any longer.
Kaylin, I've made up my mind. Cleo's parents aren't those two. It's only you. I won't let them take Cleo away from you again.
Kaylin looked at me in surprise. Then, as if strongly agreeing with my determination, she nodded firmly. The truth is, I haven't been doing nothing either. Kaylin said that she had already hired a lawyer and was moving to claim the child support that was fraudulently demanded in compensation for the divorce trial from Jeffrey and Elena. According to Kaylin's lawyer, the lawyer that Jeffrey and Elena had arranged was actually not a lawyer at all, but just a friend of theirs. I'll help too. For Cleo's sake. Thus, in the middle of the night at a restaurant, Kaylin and I teamed up. For the next 3 months, I pretended everything was normal, going about my daily life. Of course, I was extremely careful to ensure Cleo wasn't harmed. One day, Kaylin and her lawyer came to our house. The two were startled and flustered, but I calmed them down and had them take a seat. And what is your business today? Jeffrey looked puzzled, while Elena put on a brave front. We're here today to discuss the compensation for the divorce trial with you and Jeffrey, and to negotiate for Cleo's custody. Kaylin responded calmly, not backing down. Compensation for the divorce trial. That must be about Kaylin, right? Jeffrey told me all about it. Elena said, mocking her ex-wife. Of course, he would have said so, since you were Jeffrey's affair partner. What a ridiculous accusation. I met Jeffrey after he divorced you. Jeffrey just sat there silently, listening to the exchange between his ex-wife and his current wife. Now, both of you. Let's first hear what the lawyer has to say. Knowing everything but pretending to know nothing, I subtly guided the conversation to Kaylin's turn. Please take a look at these documents. The lawyer spread out the report prepared by the fake lawyer that Elena and Jeffrey had arranged. This is the report handed over by Jeffrey's lawyer when Jeffrey and Kaylin got divorced. How can something from so long ago be used as evidence? Elena was visibly flustered. What about it? I hired a proper lawyer. As Jeffrey tried to support Elena, Kaylin's lawyer cut in, almost interrupting him. Is that really a lawyer? Which law firm is he from? Ignoring the stammering Jeffrey, the lawyer continued. As a fellow lawyer, I must say this report lacks credibility. The photographic evidence is clearly fabricated, and the testimonies regarding Kaylin's alleged neglect are too vague.
But that evidence was enough to make this woman divorce Jeffrey,
Elena desperately argued. Indeed, Kaylin did comply and get divorced at the time. However, the demanded child support was excessively high. And despite paying child support properly, she hasn't been allowed to see her child even once, has she? That's because Cleo didn't want to see her. No way. I screamed internally. After the divorce, when Cleo came to us, how much did she long for her mother? I began to tremble with anger. Even so, she did neglect her child, right? The testimony was taken, even if it's vague. Elena, regaining some of her composure, argued.
Would you like to see the child care diary I kept at the time?
Kaylin took out a notebook. It was an ordinary, well-worn B5 size notebook. The cover read Cleo's child care diary.
That can be written at any time after the fact.
However, as Kaylin silently showed the contents of the notebook, the color drained from Elena's face. It was filled with detailed records of Cleo's feedings, diaper changes, and sleep times, down to the date, day of the week, and time. At the end of each day, there was a brief diary entry from Kaylin. Messages to Cleo could also be seen in the empty spaces. Elena, raising a 1-year-old Mina, should understand. Could someone who neglected their child write such a detailed childcare diary? Elena was at a loss for words. Seeing Elena's reaction, Jeffrey looked utterly confused. He probably couldn't understand, having never properly participated in childcare. In this diary, there are also entries regarding Jeffrey's actions. My actions. Jeffrey was already exhausted.
It mentions when you said you were working late or going on business trips.
Kaylin added with a tone implying that Jeffrey knew exactly what she was talking about.
You can't expose an affair with just a diary.
Elena's point was valid. A diary alone wouldn't serve as proof. That's the part that took some effort. Elena looked triumphantly at Kaylin, but then began to look uneasy as if she had remembered something.
I kept Jeffrey's credit card statements. After we divorced, I found them tucked away in our household account book.
Neither Elena nor Jeffrey seemed willing to argue.
On the days mentioned in the diary when Jeffrey claimed to be on a business trip, the credit card statements show charges from a hot spring inn.
Ignoring the silent pair, Kaylin continued.
And on the same days, a certain woman's social media posts have photos. The hashtags include the inn's name and words like secret. That's just a coincidence. It could happen to anyone.
Elena's resistance seemed futile.
Indeed. But this woman, despite talking about secrets, was showing off her possessions.
Kaylin pressed further.
The watch in these photos, that's Jeffrey's, isn't it?
I could almost hear Elena and Jeffrey's hearts pounding.
That could be any watch.
So Elena didn't know.
This was a gift from my husband and me to Kaylin and Jeffrey when they got married. It's a pair watch, completely custom made.
Feigning innocence, I interjected.
That can't be.
After a moment of silence. Enough, Jeffrey said in a pitiful voice. Kaylin signaled to the lawyer with her eyes.
Since he's admitted it, that helps. We will proceed with a settlement instead of going to court.
I won't admit it. I'll take this to court if I have to.
Elena shouted, but the facade was crumbling.
Shall we discuss the matter of the falsified report by the fake lawyer? We've already spoken with this fake lawyer.
That bastard.
It turned out that the fake lawyer was Elena's friend and former boyfriend. They had been funneling the compensation from Kellen's divorce settlement and child support to him.
When we mentioned charges of document forgery, he told us everything.
Elena seemed to have no energy left to argue. From the crack in the door,
"Mom? What's going on?"
Cleo peeked in.
Nothing at all.
Kalen, looking relieved, replied,
Let's go home. To our new home, Mom and Cleo's new home.
Later, the case went to court instead of being settled out of court. This time, the other side hired a real lawyer. However, the outcome was clear. Custody of Cleo was transferred to Kalen. Jeffrey and Elena's actions were deemed criminal. Additionally, they were required to return the fraudulent compensation and child support they had received, and pay Kalen proper compensation and child support. Jeffrey and Elena ended up blaming each other and ultimately got divorced. Elena was disowned by her family, and her parents took custody of Mina. She was now deep in debt and working at a massage parlor. Naturally, I also cut ties with Jeffrey. Who would take care of a criminal? I sold the house I used to live in and now enjoy living alone, free and comfortable. Jeffrey is still paying Kalen, but I have no interest in where he is or what he's doing. As for Kalen, she and Cleo sometimes come to visit me. We're like friends now. It turns out she's getting along well with the lawyer from that time. When they visit, she often seeks my advice on her love life, and he gets along well with Cleo. One day, while Kalen was seeking my advice, Cleo suddenly said, "Mom, I like it when you're smiling. And I have the most fun when you're with that guy." A year has passed since then. Today, Kalen and Cleo are coming to visit. I couldn't wait and went outside to greet them. Soon, I saw them walking toward me. Cleo was holding Kalen's hand, looking out for her.
He's such a kind child.
"Molly, did you come out just for us?" "Thank you."
It's nothing. I was looking forward to it too. And
I took Kalen's bag and looked at her swollen belly.
You're not alone anymore.
I can't wait to meet the baby. Dad is excited too. Seeing their happy faces, I smiled. Outside, the air was warm with the promise of spring. My name is Lily. I'm a 32-year-old working mother. When I first got married, I worked in customer service, but due to the impact of the pandemic, I became a target for staff reductions, and since then I've been working from home. I always preferred working alone, doing meticulous tasks over customer service or being in the public eye, and I enjoyed making accessories and stuffed toys by hand. However, these were just hobbies, and I never considered showing or selling them to anyone. But then, a friend posted my work on social media, which caught the eye of a shop owner who sold small items, and I got the chance to have my work displayed there. Eventually, reviews from the customers have increased sales, and now I can make a living from it. Unlike when I made things as a hobby, now I have to incorporate customer requests, deal with deadlines, and face other challenges, but it's far more fulfilling than doing a job I wasn't suited for. Despite this, I have some concerns about my family at the moment. It's about my husband, Ethan, and my mother-in-law, Rosie. Ethan was a salaryman, but after I started working from home and my business took off, he was influenced by it and suddenly quit his job one day. Without consulting me at all, he just suddenly quit. Naturally, I asked Ethan,
why didn't you talk to me about this?
Ethan, with a serious look on his face, answered,
"Seeing you shine doing what you love made me envious. I want to live my life without regrets too. I know it'll be a burden for a while, but please understand."
When he said that, I couldn't help but feel guilty for blaming him entirely. After all, when I was laid off from my previous job and had no income, Ethan covered our living expenses despite his complaints. With my current income, we could manage even if Ethan was unemployed. I reconsidered and said to Ethan, "Okay. Take your time and find a job that you're satisfied with." Showing understanding and encouragement. Since then, Ethan has been at home and started doing housework, which he never did before. Thanks to that, my work progressed smoothly, and I was able to take on more orders, gradually increasing my income. After a few months, our lifestyle of me working in my room and Ethan being a house husband became established, and I felt no discomfort or dissatisfaction. However, there is one person who absolutely doesn't like this arrangement. That's Rosie. She believes that men should work outside to support the family while women should support men and take care of the home. While this belief itself isn't bad, Rosie tries to impose it on us. She doesn't understand the concept of working from home and, no matter how many times I explain it.
How is that different from being a bum? You're just playing at home, so stop that and focus on housework and having children.
She refuses to understand. Even when I explained Ethan's current situation and that we wouldn't be able to live without my income, she just one-sidedly said,
"Ethan has always been smart and capable, so he'll find a better paying job soon. It's your duty as his wife to support him to do that, but instead, you're getting a big head with this hobby like work and keeping Ethan trapped at home. It's your fault Ethan can't work."
It's tough to focus on work when she says such things over the phone or visits unannounced. When I complained to Ethan, he just said,
"She's from an older generation, so try to manage until I find a job,"
and didn't intervene. Even though I have no complaints about our current lifestyle, the stress from Rosie is building up, and I worry it might explode one day. Before doing anything else, I wanted to find a solution. As I thought about it, I began to worry about the future. What was Ethan thinking? Looking at Ethan now, it didn't seem like he was job hunting, and I wondered if this situation would continue indefinitely. But if I told him to find a job quickly, it might hurt his pride and lead to a fight. I couldn't say anything because I felt guilty about having an income and leaving the housework to Ethan. Then one day, Ethan said,
"I found a job. I finally found a job I want to do for the rest of my life,"
Ethan said with shining eyes. Seeing that expression for the first time in a while made me happy too, so I asked what kind of job it was. Ethan replied,
"A web writer."
I was surprised and a doubt arose in me. A writer? Can you really become one that easy? Ethan had previously worked in sales, and I had never heard that he was good at writing. I had never heard of him having any connections in publishing or related fields. I had seen on TV that it was a popular job among stay-at-home moms recently, but I also knew that it took a long time to make a living unless you were a true professional.
"It'll be fine. It seems tough at first, but once I get more projects, I'll start earning quickly. Like you, I'll be working from home, and being a writer sounds cool, doesn't it?"
Ignoring my worries, Ethan was happily talking about the job.
"Did you choose that job just because it sounds cool?"
Ethan showed a displeased expression at my question.
"So what? The reason doesn't matter. You started because you liked it too, right?"
Well, that's true, but... In contrast to the enthusiastic Ethan, I felt uneasy. What genre of writing are you going to do? Well, various kinds at first. Ethan's vague answer made me even more worried.
"Don't worry so much. I'll catch up to your income soon,"
Ethan said, giving a big smile and a thumbs up. Internally, I was exasperated, but if I said anything to Ethan now...
What, acting all high and mighty?
So, I said nothing. I was anxious, but Ethan's point was valid. It might be tough at first, but once he gets the hang of it, it could stabilize. I had experienced the same thing, so I shouldn't dismiss Ethan's chosen job. Maybe Ethan had a hidden talent in this field and would truly flourish. Someday, Ethan might be writing articles about my work. It might not just be a dream. In the midst of my worries, I found this faint dream and decided to support Ethan, but this decision turned out to be a big mistake. Without any preliminary knowledge or research, Ethan started, but he struggled even with short assignments, sitting in front of the computer all day, constantly frustrated. Of course, he didn't do any housework either, just sat in front of the computer, pulling his hair. Whenever I said something, he would snap at me, and I found myself watching his mood even in casual conversations. This meant I had to do all the housework, interrupting my work. Even so, I told myself that everything is tough at first, and once he got used to it, he would be more relaxed, so I didn't complain to Ethan. A few more months passed. Ethan's income, which was about $100 at first, started to increase gradually. Although it wasn't enough to live on, the fact that Ethan had worked hard was undeniable, so I praised and encouraged him as much as possible. However, from that time, Ethan's behavior became strange. About the project. Or, that client said. He started saying things like this more often than not, which are industry terms. He seemed to be acting like a seasoned writer. Mysteriously, condescending remarks from him began to stand out more frequently. Still, I figured everyone goes through phases where they get a little full of themselves, so I showed some understanding while secretly rolling my eyes and letting it slide. If it had been just that, it would have been cute, but Rosie's grand misunderstanding started and her harassment towards me escalated.
You know, Ethan is really amazing. He's able to get results in such a short period of time,
she said triumphantly to me. Sure, he started working, but was it really something to say with such a face? But then Rosie's next words made me furrow my brows.
While you've been doing nothing at home, Ethan has already surpassed your income. You need to quit your job and start having children.
What? Ethan surpassed my income. I couldn't grasp the meaning of Rosie's words and fell silent.
It looks like you're speechless. You should be grateful to have a husband as capable as Ethan. Honestly, you're not cut out to be a wife,
she continued.
I'm sorry, I don't understand what you're saying. Ethan surpassed my income? Did he tell you that?
Yes, he did.
He's been crying about how hard it is to do all the housework every day. If you can't take care of Ethan, give him back to me.
As I started to see what was going on, I decided it would be better to talk to Ethan instead of arguing with her. I nodded appropriately, gently ushered Rosie out, and waited for Ethan to come home. In the evening, Ethan, who had been out pretending to be a savvy writer covering a cafe article, came back. I told him what Rosie had said to me during the day.
What have you been telling Rosie? She seems to be really misunderstanding things.
When I said that, Ethan started to panic.
Huh. I'm not sure. Maybe I didn't explain it well?
Seeing Ethan's reaction, I was convinced he was lying.
You don't have to tell the whole truth, but it's hard for me when you make it sound like everything is my fault. Rosie hasn't liked me from the start, and I want you to clear up this misunderstanding.
When I said this, Ethan's eyes suddenly flashed with anger, as if he felt accused.
Shut up. Men have pride, you know. Can't you go along with a little lie?
Sorry. Startled by Ethan's sudden shout, I apologized reflexively. But Ethan said,
I'm feeling sick of this,
and stormed out. When did Ethan become like this? He wasn't always this difficult. He used to be a bit childish, but he never had such temper tantrums. Is it my fault? Did he hate that I left the housework to him? Did my higher income hurt him? But even so, I can't just quit my job so easily, and things won't change overnight. What should I do? I couldn't sleep at all, and Ethan didn't come home that night. The next morning, I heard the front door open and thought it was Ethan. But it wasn't Ethan, it was Rosie.
Oh, what? Have you been crying? Haven't slept?
You look awful. Seeing my face, Rosie said with a snicker.
Where's Ethan?
I was so surprised that I couldn't respond, as I thought Ethan had gone to Rosie's place.
Humph, can't even answer properly?
Rosie sat on the sofa. Just then, Ethan came back.
Huh? Mom, what are you doing here so early in the morning?
Ethan looked surprised to see Rosie.
I figured you haven't been eating well, so I decided to make you breakfast. I also brought plenty of side dishes,
Rosie said, pulling out numerous containers from a paper bag.
By the way, Ethan, where were you headed so early in the morning?
Rosie asked, and Ethan, looking slightly flustered, replied,
Just for a walk.
Then, turning to me.
Right, Lily?
He added. Ethan's flustered reaction made me feel a growing sense of unease. When I didn't respond, Ethan tried to cover it up by overly praising Rosie's homemade treats.
Honestly, any decent wife would get up earlier than her husband to prepare breakfast. But look at you, with your puffy face, still in your pajamas, just standing there. Poor Ethan,
Rosie said smugly, glancing at me sideways. Then Ethan joined in with Rosie, saying,
Exactly, Mom, tell her.
Rosie's snide remarks only happened when Ethan wasn't around, and whenever I told Ethan, he would just laugh it off. But now, right in front of me, Ethan was teaming up with Rosie to insult me. And he was doing it with a carefree smile I'd never seen before.
Calling that hobby of yours work. You have no idea how different it is from a man's job. Right? I should have opposed this marriage. Mom, this is delicious. You're the best,
Ethan said loudly, deliberately, while shoveling food into his mouth, and Rosie lounged on the sofa as if it were her own home. At that moment, I felt truly miserable for the first time.
Hey! At least make some coffee. You really have no sense, do you?
The instant Rosie said that, something snapped inside me. I grabbed Rosie by the arm and forcibly pushed her out, locking and chaining the door. Rosie started shouting from outside.
Hey! What are you doing?
I stood in front of the door as Ethan tried to unlock it.
What was that about? Are you both enjoying bullying me? What's your deal? And where were you last night? Shut up. Just open the door. No! I'm talking to you. I won't move until you answer me. Shut up.
Ethan shoved me aside and opened the door.
What's wrong with you? You're a horrible woman. Apologize to Mom.
Even with both of them yelling at me, I kept my mouth tightly shut.
You've got to be kidding me. Think about what you've done.
Ethan spat those words at me and left with Rosie. As Ethan walked past me, I caught a faint scent of soap. It's over. The moment I said it out loud, I couldn't stop the tears. Ethan hadn't changed. He had always been like this, I just failed to see it. The fact that I earned more only highlighted his true nature. As for where Ethan was last night, a woman's intuition shouldn't be underestimated. I could guess. I didn't want to know, but maybe I needed to find out. I wanted to lie down, but I had a lot of work piled up. I washed my tears away with cold water and headed to my workshop. The next day, Ethan and Rosie showed up as if nothing had happened. Then she said, "Have you reflected on your behavior?" "Well, it doesn't matter. Ethan and I talked it over last night. I'm moving in today to live with you."
What?
That's right. Moving in. Ethan's suffering like this is unfair, so I'll be here to supervise you. Right, Ethan?
Yeah. You can learn a lot from Mom about being a proper wife.
They looked at me, but it was as if they were talking to themselves, disregarding my presence.
Is Rosie going to live here?
That's what I've been saying, isn't it? You really lack comprehension, don't you? Listen, you are living it up on just $500 a month and taking advantage of Ethan, right? You're only able to stay here because Ethan makes $10,000 a month. You should be grateful to Ethan for your lifestyle. When I looked at Ethan's face, he seemed to know he was lying and avoided my gaze. However, he smiled next to Rosie, as if to say he had an ally. Seeing that, I realized I couldn't stay with him any longer. All right. I'll divorce Ethan. Enjoy your life with him and his $500 monthly income. When I said that, Rosie laughed at me. Huh? What are you talking about? Spouting such sore loser nonsense. Oh well. If you want a divorce, go ahead. It's what I wanted all along. Just leave. Rosie didn't notice Ethan starting to panic. Understood. Ethan, I'll contact you later about the proceedings. I said this and packed a suitcase with some clothes and essential work tools. I'll be in touch.
Wait a minute.
Ethan hurried after me, but... Ethan, there's no need to stop her. Rosie clung to Ethan's arm as I quickly left the house. It didn't take long for Rosie to learn all the facts. I promptly arranged for a lawyer and moving company, and terminated the apartment lease. From early morning, movers started taking out my belongings, causing Ethan and Rosie to frantically call me one after the other.
What is this? What's going on?
Rosie yelled over the phone, but I remained calm. You said if I wanted a divorce, go ahead, didn't you? So, I'm just moving my things out. The apartment lease is terminated, so please leave by the end of this month.
Huh? Why?
Why? Because the lease was in my name, I paid the initial fees, and I was the one paying the rent. The furniture and appliances were bought when we first got married, so I'll leave them for you. Ethan took over the phone and shouted,
Hey! You can't just do this. I supported you when you were unemployed too.
True, but it was only for a few months, right? I've supported you financially much more. I also turned a blind eye when you used my card for expenses and such.
But this is outrageous. Pay me compensation. Yeah. Pay us compensation.
Rosie screamed beside Ethan, but thanks to my mental rehearsals over the past few days, I could speak smoothly. Compensation, you say? Did you think I wouldn't notice? I was aware of your affair. I have the evidence. At my words, Ethan fell silent for a moment, and the phone was handed back to Rosie.
You, with your lack of feminine charm. An affair? That won't get you compensation. It's not even a valid reason for divorce.
Rosie, do you remember destroying my work tools, calling them worthless toys? And it wasn't just once or twice, was it? I've submitted photos of the broken tools, receipts from their purchase, and emails documenting the delays they caused to my lawyer. Do you still call them excuses? When I said that, Rosie shrieked.
Just show your face. Come here right now.
You'll hear from my lawyer soon.
Save what you have to say for the meeting. Looking forward to it.
With that, I hung up the phone. A meeting was arranged later. I braced myself, wondering what kind of expressions Ethan and Rosie would have after having cursed me so fiercely before. However, Ethan and Rosie had completely lost their momentum. Ethan must have finally understood the situation he was in. Rosie, too, seemed to have realized the reality of her supposedly brilliant son and kept her head down. As the lawyer calmly stated the facts of Ethan's infidelity and the conditions for divorce, Ethan suddenly collapsed onto the table and began to cry.
Please forgive me. I was just frustrated. You make more money than me and do what you love for a living. But I couldn't tell Mom, and I took advantage of your kindness. I just wanted to show off a little. That's right. Ethan did nothing wrong. You understand, don't you? A man has his pride. You get it, right? Please reconsider the divorce.
Beside Ethan, Rosie was dramatically crying with her face in her hands. It was obvious they were trying to gain sympathy. I knew all about Ethan's reckless spending with my card, his failed attempt to buy a luxury car in my name because he couldn't sign the contract without me, and the expensive gifts he bought for his affair partner. Hearing them talk about a man's pride after all that just made me laugh.
Rosie, you said that it was only natural for Ethan to cheat on me because I lacked attractiveness as a woman, didn't you? You even said it would be a blessing if we divorced. So why are you trying to stop this divorce now? Did I say that?
I don't remember. Rosie mumbled, avoiding eye contact with me.
It's about the money, isn't it? You're panicking because if Ethan and I divorce, your lifestyle will be unsustainable, right? You must know by now that the money sent to you was from my income. You just don't want to lose that.
That's not true.
I just want you to come back. It's too late to say that now. I can't forget the things you've said and done to me, and there's no way I can support you and your son like before. An apology isn't enough to forgive everything.
When I said that, Rosie finally raised her head and looked me in the eyes. As I stared straight at her, Rosie's face twisted in frustration and she looked down again.
Please, reconsider. I'll find a proper job. Okay? It'll be fine, right? You're busy with work, so it's better if we stay together, isn't it?
Seeing Ethan pleading with upturned eyes, I realized I had no feelings left for him.
We're past that point. Honestly, it's very disappointing. But I can't live with you anymore. I have many flaws and things I need to reflect on, but from now on, please cherish your beloved Rosie and live happily together as mother and son. That's what I hope for now.
No way!
Glancing at Rosie, I saw her glaring at me. I didn't look away from Rosie and said,
Rosie, isn't it great? Not only did you get rid of the wife you didn't like, but you also got your beloved son back. It's truly a dream come true. I hope you find a wife who will do everything you want someday. Enjoy your life with your son, who thinks he's a big shot in the industry on a $500 salary. Now you can cook him delicious meals every day. You must be so happy, Rosie.
I smiled sweetly as I said this. I thought I heard Rosie mutter,
"You devil."
But I pretended not to hear and carried on calmly. Thus, my divorce from Ethan was finalized successfully. Ethan sold the furniture and appliances I left behind and moved back in with his parents, but without an income, the relationship with his parents deteriorated, creating a tense living situation. Now that we're no longer together, I hope he will put serious effort into his current job to make a living. He was just relying on my income, but I'm sure he'll get serious when he's under pressure. I want him to get serious. With a heavy burden lifted off my shoulders, my work has become even more productive, and recently I've been getting orders from various places. Now, I can afford to hire an assistant and have started my own company. There was a bit of a commotion when my company's website and the social media managed by my staff received slanderous comments about my products and me personally, but it was quickly discovered that Rosie was the source of all the negativity. I considered hiring a lawyer to file a lawsuit, but I thought it would be more mentally taxing to deal with Rosie for a long time if I escalated the situation, so I settled for a warning. I want to believe it has been resolved, but if something like this happens again, I won't hold back. Rosie probably blames me for the situation she's in now. Thinking about her obsession makes me shudder, but it doesn't matter anymore. I'm now living a fulfilling life with my team.
Get out of here, you useless thing.
Even as I laid out all the evidence of John's infidelity on the table, his mother Emily just laughed triumphantly. Since I was the one who initiated the divorce, John should technically be the one getting dumped. Yet Emily, far from being apologetic, was rudely trying to kick me out. John, cornered, didn't say a word, his head bowed. I had no expectations left for Emily, who always saw me as an enemy and criticized everything I did, and for John, who not only tolerated but responded to her. I'm moving out today. Emily seemed to hate me, her son's wife, more than she was upset about her son's infidelity. She never tried to reconcile. I went ahead with my moving plans as scheduled, revealing a final secret at the last moment. It was my ultimate revenge against Emily, who mockingly saw me off, and John, who never answered when it mattered. I am Emma. I turned 34 this year. Just a normal housewife who married a sincere man and had an average happy life. We hadn't had kids yet. Children are a gift from heaven. John used to say, so I didn't think much of it. We were a normal couple, but there was one problem that troubled me. It was about Emily. Emily lived close to us. Whenever she showed up around dinner time, I'd be rushed to prepare a meal. Despite eating everything, she constantly complained about the quantity and seasoning of the food.
I've come all this way. Don't you have the decency to serve me something nice?
I'm sorry. Emily would come unannounced almost daily, and always say things like that. Despite my frustration with her remarks, I tried to avoid causing a scene. Moreover, Emily would often say,
"When will you give me a grandchild?"
She seemed to blame me. Perhaps because John is a year younger. Even though John and I agreed that children are a gift, Emily wouldn't listen when I explained.
Are you just saying that because you're hiding some flaw in yourself? That's too much.
No matter what I say, she just keeps nagging me. It's getting nowhere. What used to be a few visits a month became more frequent and longer, becoming nothing but a pain for me. She negates everything I do every day, and I'm just exhausted.
Always like this, and it's not good for me or your mother. Please stop her coming over unannounced.
What's the big deal? We're family. Emma should rely more on our parents.
Rely on them? They do nothing but complain.
It just means they have high expectations of you. No matter how much I try to explain to John. They mean well. That's all he says. Even when I express my displeasure about them coming over without notice. But we're family. He never takes my side. Neither my husband nor Emily tries to see things from my perspective. I realize I'm the only one on my side in this house, and I stop relying on John. Then, one day, as I was returning from shopping, heavier bags in hand than usual, my steps were heavy. Thinking about the possibility of Emily's visit, I bought extra groceries, and the thought of preparing dinner was a burden. Without realizing, I sighed. What's with the gloom? Emily? What?
Is it inconvenient for you that it's me?
I looked up to see Emily, apparently having been waiting in front of the house, glaring at me with her arms crossed. Caught off guard by her even earlier arrival, I involuntarily frowned. She noticed and, narrowing her eyes in displeasure, said,
"Do you hate it so much when I come?" "Well, I'm here because my son asked me to. Don't you think it's rude of you to act this way?"
"What? What do you mean?" I was shocked by her words. When I asked what she meant, she said, "Emma wants Mom to come over. John told her so." I was speechless with John, who, instead of listening to me, had done the exact opposite.
"If you feel that way, you don't have to come over forcibly." Well, what an attitude for me. Acting as if it's harassment when you were the one who wanted it.
I couldn't say outright that I hadn't said such a thing, and even if I claimed John was lying, she wouldn't believe me. So, I just stayed silent, saying nothing. Even when John came home for dinner, Emily kept up her constant complaints about me.
Can you believe it? I go out of my way to visit, and she sighs at me.
Mom, deep down Emma's really happy about it.
That can't be true. If that were the case, why would she try to discourage me from coming?
Even as Emily relayed John's fabricated story, John seemed unconcerned. Instead, he went along with her, making me out to be the bad fellow. "I'll talk to Emma later."
"Mom, just come over whenever you like, as usual." "You're so kind. This wonderful son is wasted on Emma. Showing a little gratitude wouldn't hurt, you know."
She looked satisfied as John saw her off with the words she wanted to hear. She said to me,
"John is a good person. Be grateful."
After the door closed, I glared at John.
"What was all that about earlier?"
"What do you mean?"
"Not I'll talk to her later. I've been saying it for a while now. I'm troubled by Emily's sudden visits."
John, feigning ignorance, was met with all the frustration I had been holding back. I couldn't stand him siding with Emily, making me look foolish, not even speaking up for me.
"And what's this about me being secretly happy when Emily comes? Who said that? What's the big deal? Mom's visits are helping you out, right?" "Helping me out how? Both of you mocking me while waiting for a meal to be served. What part of that is helpful?" "So you're saying you want Mom to never come again?"
"That's rude. She's coming over thinking of you." The conversation with him, who didn't realize the absurdity of his statements and kept making nonsensical remarks, just ran in circles and got nowhere. Far from it, when confronted with the fact that he lied to Emily about me wanting her to visit, he justifies it as thinking it was for the best. Even though we're speaking English, I feel like nothing is getting through to John, and it's making my head spin.
"Why would you do something like this? Why would you say that?"
I became distrustful of John for deliberately making Emily come to our house. Our communication as a couple was non-existent, and I didn't know what to do, unable to trust him. While I was struggling with this alone, I stumbled upon something unbelievable.
"I'm going to get a part-time job." "What? Why? If I'm home, I'll have to face Emily all the time. You don't understand, so I have no other choice."
John looked unhappy with my decision, but I had no intention of backing down. Since I have no allies in this house, I decided to make sure I'm away as much as possible. As expected, John quickly gave Emily a spare key in preparation for my absences. It seemed John really wanted Emily to keep an eye on me, even persistently asking about my work hours. If I hadn't known, I would have been startled to see Emily waiting at the entrance, timing it to my return. As soon as I opened the door, there was Emily, arms crossed, looking right at me. I realized instantly that John must have informed her and sighed.
"Oh." Sighing at the sight of someone, how rude. "You were called here by John, right? Hasn't he returned yet? Didn't you tell him you wanted me to come? What's with that attitude?" "I didn't call for you."
If this had been the old me, I would have just swallowed my dissatisfaction. But now that I've realized even John is against me, I've lost all motivation to do so. It was long past the time John should have been home from work, but he still hadn't returned. Even so, Emily seemed displeased with me starting a part-time job.
"Don't use working as an excuse just because you can't have my grandchild. Please don't assume it's my fault we can't have children. There wasn't anything wrong in the tests. Who knows, maybe the tests just didn't show it. As usual, Emily was saying whatever she wanted in front of me. Even though I started a part-time job and began talking back, which only made Emily angrier, I didn't care what she thought anymore. The part-time job was more than just a way to not be at home. It started when I accidentally saw a woman's name in a notification on John's phone. Seeing that name, I understood everything. John was having Emily monitor me while he went off to cheat. He's probably not coming straight home now, but meeting her instead. I had a reason to be so sure. The name I saw belonged to his ex-girlfriend. I knew it through a mutual friend of ours, and Emily often compared me to her. Emily even bragged. We're still close. So, I clearly remembered her. From this person, there was a message with a heart. Thanks for Sunday. I want to see you again. He received a message with a heart emoji. Despite seeing that, I'm not so oblivious as to not notice anything. From the day I saw that, I decided to take revenge on the two of them. I planned to gather evidence using my own money. I could have used John's money, but I didn't want to rely on anything of his. Then, I found out I was pregnant. Although I hesitated, thinking the child was John's, the child was innocent. Confused, but thinking this way, I told John, and he said something hurtful. A child? Really? Yes, really. I've been to the doctor, there's no mistake. Is it really my child? What do you mean? Incredibly, upon hearing about my pregnancy, he doubted whether he was the father. How could he think I had the time for such things while being watched by Emily every day? Shocked and at a loss for words, John continued. You started a part-time job, right? Maybe you found some guy there. How dare he say that? Just because he's cheating, doesn't mean I am too. I wanted to say that but held back and just said, enough. I cut off the conversation and turned my back. I had no more expectations of this man becoming a father. Even Emily, as usual, continued to make me do the housework despite knowing about my pregnancy. Don't even think about relying on John for housework just because you're pregnant. He would do anything even if I asked. While preparing meals, I endured her heartless words. John, seeing his wife like this, said nothing and just watched TV. I had endured it all this time because I was alone, but I couldn't take it anymore. This environment wasn't good for a child. Unable to bear it any longer, I secretly called my parents' house at night. I explained everything and asked for help for the sake of the baby in my belly. My brother Michael offered his support. I'm glad you told me. Thanks for relying on me. Leave the rest to your brother. I had feared they might be angry for not speaking up sooner. But instead of anger, my family offered me words of comfort. I had been so determined to show no weakness to anyone. The tears I had been holding back finally fell. With Michael's help, I prepared for my counterattack. In front of Emily, I demanded a divorce from John. I know you've been cheating all along. I want a divorce. That's troublesome. I won't divorce. What are you saying? Why resist after betraying me? I had thought John would easily agree to a divorce if his infidelity was exposed, but surprisingly, he was reluctant. I wondered if he still had feelings for me, but his words were again unreasonable. Because she can't do housework. His words filled me with anger. At the same time, I felt embarrassed for having even a slight hope. This man, who questioned if the baby was my child, and tried to erase his behavior, couldn't possibly have any affection for me. I was at my limit with his selfishness and Emily's silence in the face of all this. What's that supposed to mean? I'm not a housekeeper. Don't be so presumptuous. Hey, what kind of tone is that to take with John? What is the right way to behave towards a cheater like him? She says anything to me, but never a word to John. In front of her, I scattered the evidence of John's affair all over the table. These were photos taken by a detective I hired with the money I saved from my part-time job.
While I was working or being insulted by Emily, John was happily meeting his ex-girlfriend. There were even photos of them coming out of a hotel, irrefutable evidence. Emily was initially silent, but as she came to her senses, she lashed out at me.
It's because you're such a terrible wife that he cheated. I always thought that girl was cuter and better for him than you. So, you're in favor of the divorce then?
Furious at me, Emily was actually justifying John's affair. I quickly pulled out the pre-filled divorce papers. John, despite his complaints, was hurried by me and Emily and seemed to have no choice but to sign.
Are you satisfied now? Get out, you useless thing.
Yes, I'm moving out now. Right this instant. As I sent a message on my phone, the front door opened, and the movers came in cheerfully. Among them was Michael. Long time no see, John.
What? What's going on?
I knew it would come to this, so I had already asked Michael to help with the move.
I had previously explained the situation to Michael, who works in a moving company, and his colleagues, and asked them to pack and move my belongings. As I directed them to my stuff, they efficiently carried out the furniture, leaving John and Emily stunned. I had them move the dresser I bought before marriage and the appliances my parents bought for me without any hesitation. John could only look bewildered as the kitchen became empty. Without saying anything to John, who looked so pitiful, I asked Michael to take the sofa. Even the small sofa Emily used as if it was her own was taken out right in front of her.
Are you taking everything?
These were bought with our parents' money for my sister.
Michael, towering over her, looked coldly at Emily, who, unable to confront him, glared at me instead. After all the belongings were moved, and as I was about to get into the car, Emily, seemingly regaining her composure, came out to see me off, laughing.
We don't need a wife with no manners like you.
Is that so?
Well, I'm done with this mother and son too.
Though I retorted with a smile, my anger at John, who wouldn't say anything, and Emily, who comforted him, didn't subside. So, I decided to drop one last bombshell.
Oh, by the way, Emily, do you know why John chose his ex-girlfriend as his affair partner?
Obviously, she must be more capable than you.
Turns out, she can't have children. That's why she was convenient for him.
Meaning, Emily's long-awaited grandchild wouldn't be coming from that relationship. Emily's eyes widened in shock at my words. I couldn't help but laugh at her expression. John, who apparently hadn't expected this to be revealed, looked at me, pale-faced.
How did you know that? How? You talked about it with her, didn't you?
John, what are you thinking?
It's not like that, Mom. Listen to me.
Emily was evidently upset at the prospect of not having a grandchild, and they began to argue. It seemed John hadn't expected Emily to turn against him. Watching them flounder, I smirked. Annoyed things weren't going his way, John glared at me.
Don't trouble her. I'm the one getting divorced.
After all the trouble you've caused me? Of course, I'll be claiming alimony in the divorce settlement, so be prepared.
Stop it. She's never worked anything but part-time.
So what? And shouldn't you be worrying about yourself? You'll be paying too.
John's defense of his ex-girlfriend wavered as soon as money was mentioned. When I hinted at what was to come, they both started calling me greedy. It was laughable how brazen they were after all they had done. I couldn't stay with such people any longer. As I was about to finally get in the car, Emily shouted.
Then at least give us your child. After you give birth, we'll take it.
What kind of logic is that?
It's our grandchild. I can't let a wife with such a terrible character raise it. Who knows what kind of adult they'll become?
No way.
If they're raised in this house, they'll end up like an adult who cheats.
I laughed it off, and Emily, unable to retort, fell silent. Feeling refreshed at her reaction, I left my house behind with Michael's help. Later, I heard that the ex-girlfriend told John.
I can't pay the divorce settlement.
It's impossible. Predictably, she dumped John and disappeared.
So, I'm going to change and do better. I want you to come back.
I don't understand what you mean by so.
Stop saying silly things. It seemed Jean, disliking the idea of paying both the divorce settlement and child support, thought I would come back and save him the trouble. He was a man of unfathomable thoughts, but probably hadn't thought things through. As I sighed over the phone, Michael, who was listening, couldn't hold back and took the phone from me. I've heard enough. The reason for the divorce is your foolishness. Reflect on it a bit. Realizing Michael's sternness, John, already frightened by the moving incident, quickly hung up. Thanks to Michael pushing for the payment, the divorce settlement was smoothly settled. After the divorce, I'm now taking my time at my parents' house with my newborn baby. By the way, from Emily as well. I want to see my grandchild. You must understand how lonely I feel as a grandmother. Mom received the phone call crying and pleading for help. Mom, being well aware of the situation, said, "After saying you don't need such a wife and kicking her out, how dare you say that?" She yelled over the phone like Michael and hung up. Let us know if you need anything. Families are there to help each other. Yes, thank you. I need to be strong too. When I was in that house, I felt alone and burdened. But now, I have a supportive family. Determined to be strong for my child, I'm working hard and moving forward. My son Roderick and my husband David. I watched them hurriedly leave the house. Since it's Sunday, I thought I'd take it easy until Roderick came back. As I was hanging up the laundry, I heard the phone ring. Hello, is this the home of Roderick? A woman's voice came from the other side of the line. Is this Roderick's family? Yes. I couldn't grasp the situation, but my heart started to race. This is Ainsworth from Johns Hopkins Hospital. Roderick has been in an accident and has been brought here for emergency treatment. I felt my vision blur. The Roderick who just left the house so cheerfully. We are about to perform emergency surgery. Hello? Are you okay? The woman, who introduced herself as Ainsworth, asked, sensing my silence. Yes, the hospital, right? Johns Hopkins Hospital. Please come immediately. Yes. I replied quickly and hung up the phone. I have to get to the hospital quickly. As I got ready, I tried to contact David, but he didn't answer even after several calls. I called David's office. I explained the situation and asked them to connect me to David. However, they said David had not come to the office today. For now, I decided to head to the hospital. I kept telling myself that everything would be all right, and as I was about to leave the house, someone burst in. I was so surprised that I couldn't recognize who it was at first. Mom! I forgot my sandwich! Seeing my surprise, Roderick looked at me with concern. Mom? Did I surprise you by coming back suddenly? A swirl of emotions flooded through me. Mom! Tears began to fall from my eyes. Mom? What's wrong? My name is Jeannie. I'm a 45-year-old housewife with a husband and a son. I graduated from the local high school and attended culinary school, but I didn't pursue a career in hotels or restaurants. Instead, I worked part-time at a fast food shop. My classmates went on to open their own restaurants or became famous chefs after years of hard work. But I didn't acquire any notable skills. However, I have no regrets. I now have a precious family. It may be a common story, but I'm happy. While working part-time at the fast food shop, I met my husband David. The shop I worked at also did deliveries, and I was in charge of them. David worked at one of the companies I delivered to. Since David ordered fast food almost every day, I assumed he was single, but I never imagined he would ask me out. Seeing my confusion when he asked for my contact information, David handed me a piece of paper with his number on it. Even then, I didn't know what to do and didn't contact him. I thought things might become awkward, But David's attitude didn't change, so I gradually started to be aware of him. One day, when I went to deliver as usual, I didn't see David, and I realized I felt lonely. After a week of not seeing David, I decided to text the number he had given me. "I haven't seen you lately. Are you all right?" Even though it was just one sentence, I remember being extremely nervous. Will I ever get a reply? Maybe he doesn't even think about me anymore. While I was thinking that, a reply came late at night. It was nothing special. He had just been on a business trip. "I'll be back at the office next week, so please get me some delicious fast food then." Even though I wasn't the one making it, I felt happy. I couldn't wait for the short 2-day weekend to end and for Monday to come. And then, Monday. I took extra care in getting ready that day. I took an order, prepared the fast food to deliver to David's company, and headed there with a pounding heart. The moment I saw David, whom I hadn't seen in a while, my heart raced. My hands were trembling as I handed the fast food to David. After taking the payment, David quietly said, "Thank you for the text. Can I text you again?" I nodded vigorously. "See you then." David smiled and walked away. Watching his retreating figure, I realized I had fallen in love with him. From then on, David and I started keeping in touch, eventually dating, and then getting married. After our wedding, I continued working part-time for a while but quit when I became pregnant. Thus, I became a housewife, and my days were filled with household chores for my husband and our son, Roderick. It wasn't easy, but I found it fulfilling. Roderick grew up healthy, and we became a picture-perfect happy family. It was around the time Roderick started middle school. David, who had been earning enough to support me and Roderick, got news of another promotion. Assistant director, they say. David mentioned with a sigh during our usual evening drink.
That's amazing.
While I was delighted, David seemed troubled. Aren't you happy? Since I had never worked in an office, I thought promotions were something to be happy about, but maybe it wasn't so simple. Well, yeah, I'm happy, David murmured, looking somewhat lonely. I'm sorry, I got excited all by myself. There must be something I don't understand. I thought it wasn't something to delve into deeply. Then David slowly began to talk. I'll be even busier. More business trips too. His voice was almost like a child's, seeking comfort. I'll miss you. Was he worried about me? Before we got married, David's job was quite demanding, with frequent business trips, overtime, and working on weekends. And I often expressed my loneliness. It wasn't just because I was young. I had made David worry a lot. Despite that, David's sincere responses eventually made me feel secure, and I became okay with not seeing him for days. David still remembered those times and sometimes checked my expression.
Oh, I'm fine now. I have Roderick too.
I tried to sound as cheerful as possible.
No matter how busy you are, I'll be here waiting for you, and I'll keep this home a place where you can always feel at ease.
I see. Finally looking at me, David smiled. Sensing my determination, David said nothing more. Later, David's promotion was confirmed, and we celebrated at home. Roderick was happy too, and seeing David's relieved face, I felt at ease and made a new resolve. I will make our family bond even stronger. I thought so. Ever since David got promoted to assistant director, he had been working weekends and taking short business trips. But life hadn't changed much. However, soon he started going on long business trips far away. Every time he came home, David was exhausted and often went straight to bed without eating. If he was like this at home, how was he managing on his trips? Was he eating properly? Was he getting enough sleep? While David was away, I couldn't stop worrying. But David texted and called every day, so I didn't let my anxiety show. Besides, on his days off, he would go fishing with Roderick or make time for family. And I felt that David was trying to prioritize his family.
I have to accept and support David no matter what.
That's what I thought. By the time I got used to David's long trips, Roderick had started high school. This would probably reduce my burden a little. To avoid worrying David and to enjoy my own time, I thought about starting a new hobby. Just as I was thinking that, the phone in the house rang. It was 8 p.m. Roderick was still out at his club activities. Could it be David calling from his trip? Why was he calling the house instead of my cell phone? Hello. I answered the phone cheerfully. But there was no response from the other end. Hello? I called out again, puzzled. Still, there was no sound from the other end.
Prank calls even now.
I sighed and hung up the receiver. Then, I heard a clattering sound from the yard. When I looked out into the yard, I saw an empty can rolling around. Our yard is fenced, so unless someone threw it, there shouldn't be an empty can rolling in. Not even on windy days did this happen. That was the end of it for that day, but silent calls and trash thrown into the yard continued occasionally. Not only that, strange letters started appearing in the mailbox. The letters were filled with the word curse, which was creepy. Wondering what to do, I first consulted with the neighbors, who told me that sometimes local elementary school kids play pranks. They said not to worry too much about it, and I agreed. Thinking that kids always play pranks, I tried not to mind the ongoing mischief.
Would elementary school kids really make prank calls at 8 p.m.?
With that doubt lingering in my mind, a year passed, and then things took a sudden turn. It was a Sunday. Roderick had his club activities, and David was getting ready for a long business trip the next day. So our house was bustling from the morning. I made sandwiches for Roderick and watched as the two of them rushed out of the house after breakfast. No sooner had I thought phew, I started the washing machine and began cleaning. It was Sunday, so it would be crowded everywhere. I decided to relax until Roderick came back. As I was hanging the freshly washed laundry, I heard the phone ring inside the house. It was just past 8 o'clock.
Who could be calling at this hour?
I thought it might be another prank call and hesitantly picked up the phone. Hello, is this Roderick's residence? A woman's voice came from the other end.
She sounds like she's in a hurry, speaking a bit fast.
Yes, it is.
I replied cautiously. Is this Roderick's family?
Yes.
I couldn't understand the situation, but my heart started to race. My name is Ainsworth from Johns Hopkins Hospital. Roderick has just been in an accident and has been rushed here. My vision blurred.
The Roderick who left home full of energy this morning.
We're going to perform emergency surgery now. Hello? Are you all right? The woman who introduced herself as Ainsworth asks me, receiving no response.
Yes, the hospital, right?
Calm down, me.
I try to tell myself, but it's not working. Noticing my confusion, perhaps used to situations like this, Ainsworth speaks to me in a calm voice. Johns Hopkins Hospital. Please come immediately.
Yes.
I reply hastily and hang up the phone. I understand the situation, but my emotions can't keep up.
But I have to get to the hospital quickly.
As I get dressed, I call David. I know I need to stay strong, but this is too big to handle alone. And Roderick is in a critical condition. I didn't want to worry David, but not telling him seemed wrong. Despite my internal excuses, I simply wanted to hear David's voice to ease my anxiety. However, no matter how many times I called David's phone, there was no answer. I debated texting, but if he didn't notice the calls, he probably wouldn't notice the text right away either. Maybe he stopped by the office before his trip. I decided to call David's office. Even though it's Sunday, someone might be working overtime. I explained the situation to the person who answered and asked them to pass the message to David. But to my shock, David hadn't gone to work and had no business trip planned. Already panicking about Roderick, now I had no idea where David was. I took a deep breath to calm myself. For now, I needed to head to the hospital. David's situation could be a communication mix-up. I decided to text him and wait for his reply.
It's okay. I decided to protect this family and our home.
Repeating this to myself, I was about to leave when someone rushed in. I was so startled that I couldn't recognize who it was at first.
Mom, I forgot my sandwich.
Noticing my shock, Roderick looked at me with concern.
Mom? Did I scare you by coming back suddenly?
Confusion, relief, doubt. Various emotions swirled within me. Seeing Roderick's face, I started to calm down. Roderick was right in front of me. I cupped his face with my hands to confirm. Tears fell from my eyes.
Mom? What's wrong?
Seeing Roderick's panic made me smile. Roderick was okay. I slowly began to regain my composure.
I told my club I'd be late, so I've got time.
What happened? Seeing my tears, Roderick was concerned.
When did he grow so big and kind?
As I thought that, I explained about the call I received this morning.
I was in an accident, but I'm so full of energy,
Roderick said, jumping up and down to show it. He was trying to make me laugh and reassure me. For now, how about calling the hospital to check? It could be someone else with the same name.
Roderick has always been such a responsible kid.
I walked towards the living room, where the phone is, accompanied by Roderick. I dialed the number of the hospital that I had noted down earlier. Earlier, I received a call that Roderick had been taken to the emergency room. I'm his mother. I tell the woman who answers the phone.
Now, what was the name of the person who called me earlier?
As I try to recall, the hold music stops, and the woman's voice comes back on the line. Thank you for waiting. I'm sorry, but we have no record of anyone named Roderick being brought in.
What?
I exclaim in surprise, my voice sounding strange. I apologize briefly to the woman on the phone and hang up.
So, the hospital said they didn't know anything about it, huh?
Roderick sighs. I'm sorry. I was really panicking. I start to feel apologetic. No, Mom, it's not your fault. If you heard that I was taken to the hospital, of course, you'd be surprised. Actually, I'd be sad if you didn't worry. Roderick is smiling.
But still, why would someone make such a prank call? Could it be some kind of scam?
Roderick seems to be analyzing the situation calmly. Please, stop. Anyway, I'm just glad you're okay. Feeling more at ease, I moved towards the front door to see Roderick off once again. Here, take this sandwich. You said you'd be late for your club, so you don't have time to dawdle. However, Roderick just looks at me, not moving. Roderick? What's wrong? I'm fine now. Before I can finish, Roderick interrupts. Isn't there something else that's bothering you? His eyes lock onto mine, and I feel I can't escape. This is more important than any club. Please, tell me. He's no longer the child I thought he was, but a mature adult standing before me. I tell Roderick about the pranks we've been experiencing.
This call was just another prank. Really, it's so malicious.
As I recall everything, a sense of unease rises within me. Garbage thrown into the yard, creepy letters sent to the house. Why do we have to go through this? Sensing my unease, Roderick makes a call on his phone. "Mom, I'm going to skip the club today." Given everything that's happened, the person who called might even be watching you now. Roderick smiles reassuringly at me.
"But you have a game coming up."
I can't let some prank get in the way of what my son wants to do.
I have to handle this on my own.
"It's okay, Mom."
Roderick seems unconcerned, despite my worry. I know he's trying to make sure I don't push myself too hard. Today's just a practice. It's going to be short, and not everyone is attending anyway. Then, he sits down on the living room sofa. "Are you really okay?"
"Yeah."
Roderick sits on the sofa and immediately seems lost in thought. "I'll make some tea." It seems like he doesn't hear me. When Roderick is focused on something, he tunes out everything else.
What could he be thinking about? Maybe how to deal with the pranks.
After setting the tea in front of him, Roderick turns to me and starts to speak. "I was planning to keep this from you, Mom, but maybe it's related to what's happening now." His voice was small, almost a whisper. "Do you know something?" Roderick nodded quietly and began to speak slowly.
"Please, stay calm while I tell you this,"
he prefaced, then shared a story that was hard to believe. David might be having an affair. It happened the day I went on a day trip with my friends. Roderick had come home early from school due to exams. He saw David coming out of the house with a young woman. David, flustered, said he just came to get something he forgot while on his rounds. He claimed the woman was just a colleague and quickly left. But on another day, when Roderick was returning from a club trip to the neighboring town and went into a restaurant with his friends, he saw David arguing with the woman. It was the same woman from the house. The way they argued didn't seem like a boss and subordinate. Hearing this, I felt a growing sense of dread. But I want to believe in David. He's always considerate, ensuring I don't feel lonely. He wouldn't betray me like that. Thank you for telling me, Roderick. But I still want to trust Dad.
"I thought you'd say that."
Roderick smiled a little. "If you're here, Roderick, could I go and rest for a bit? I'm feeling quite tired." I turned my back to the nodding Roderick and headed to the bedroom. I thought about lying down but couldn't shake off Roderick's story. I reached for David's desk drawer in our bedroom.
It's fine. There's nothing. He wouldn't betray me.
Still, I needed something concrete. Inside the drawer was David's planner. He usually carried it with him. Why would he forget it today of all days? With trembling hands, I opened it. I checked the page where he wrote his monthly plans and the section for today's date. I kept checking the date over and over, but it was clear a heart was drawn on today's date. When I called his office, they said he wasn't on a business trip. I couldn't reach him. The pieces started to come together. What do I want to do? I still want to believe in David. That's why I need to know the truth. Determined, I took out my phone to text David and couldn't help but laugh. The text about Roderick being taken to the hospital was still unsent.
I never thought it would come to this.
I felt that today might be a turning point in my life. I contacted your office, David. I know you're not on a trip, so please come home quickly. I sent the text and decided to rest for a while. About an hour later, David came home. He seemed angry. I heard him stomping around noisily. When I went downstairs, he came towards me and started yelling.
"Why did you contact my office without asking me first? Do you not trust me?"
He was angry without even hearing my side. David has a bad habit of getting angry when things don't go his way. So, I was used to it.
"This is a breach of our trust. Do you understand?"
Before I could interject, David started talking rapidly. At this point, it was useless to say anything. so I just listened to him for a while. Eventually, he seemed to calm down, and David grew quiet. Now it was my turn to speak.
This morning, I got a call saying Roderick was taken to the hospital. I thought I should let you know right away.
David stared at me blankly.
I tried calling your cell phone multiple times, but I couldn't reach you. So, I contacted your office.
David remained silent.
They told me you didn't have any business trips scheduled. At first, I thought it was a communication error, but
David seemed to be considering what to say.
You came back because it would be problematic if your office was contacted, right? So, where exactly were you planning to go from today?
I pressed him hard. Just as David was about to retort, Roderick appeared from the living room.
Why don't you two come over here and talk?
David looked surprised to see Roderick.
Oh, Roderick! I thought you were taken to the hospital.
Oh, didn't you hear?
It was a prank call. As you can see, I'm fine.
In a daze, David walked toward the living room. I secretly activated the voice recorder I had in my pocket. In the living room, I confronted David again.
So, what are your plans starting today? It's a business trip, of course.
David was about to shout again. I quickly raised my voice.
The other day.
David flinched a little.
The other day, I heard you brought a woman into our house. Roderick told me.
David glared at Roderick, but Roderick, with his headphones on, was absorbed in a game on his phone and didn't notice.
I explained to Roderick as well. She is just a subordinate who came to retrieve something she forgot while we were out on business.
David's voice was getting agitated again.
That's what it seems. But on another day, you were arguing with that woman, weren't you? That was...
David seemed to be thinking of another excuse.
That has nothing to do with you. I was just giving her work instructions. You have no right to criticize me for every little thing.
As David stood up, intending to yell at me again, Roderick also slowly stood up.
I saw that argument myself. It didn't seem like just work instructions.
Roderick looked down at his father, David, with a disdainful gaze. David, now being looked down upon by Roderick, fell silent under the unprecedented pressure.
This prank call today, it's happened multiple times before.
I quietly handed David a piece of paper with phone numbers written on it.
I've been writing down the numbers from the call history every time.
David looked at the numbers on the paper, visibly shaken.
I want you to check if these numbers are registered on your phone.
David averted his eyes from the paper and said,
I don't know anything about that. It's not that you don't know. Let me check. If you can't do that, call these numbers.
David's attitude confirmed my suspicion. David knew who was behind those calls. As I stepped closer, David sank to the floor, defeated.
I'm in trouble too.
David began to explain in a small voice. It turned out that the woman wasn't just a subordinate to him. She had a family, and they had been involved in a relationship where they both understood the boundaries. But recently, she started pressing him for a divorce, which he wasn't prepared for, causing him distress.
She has a family too, and getting involved with a subordinate was my mistake. I don't want to make a big deal out of it.
So far, there hasn't been any apology directed at me.
I won't see her anymore, so can you help me break up with her?
I didn't respond and instead asked for detailed information about when their relationship started. And everything leading up to the present. David seemed to assume I would cooperate and began sharing everything freely. This is all the truth. Let's work together to end it with her. As if I'd help you. Before I could voice my thoughts, Roderick spoke up to David.
Dad, are you serious? This is the lowest thing you could ever do.
David looked like he was about to cry, glancing between me and Roderick.
Seriously, this is the lowest. Who do you think will help you? You got to be kidding me.
David looked utterly confused, alternating his gaze between me and Roderick.
I will be taking Roderick and going back to my parents' house. I'll handle the necessary procedures through my lawyer.
With those words, Roderick and I left the scene. A few months later, our divorce was finalized. I submitted recordings from a voice recorder as evidence, and perhaps because David had admitted to the affair himself, he readily agreed to my demands for compensation and child support. However, the woman David had an affair, Ainsworth, was problematic. When I sent her a certified letter demanding compensation for the divorce due to her affair with David, she refused. After multiple reminders, the matter escalated to mediation, where she made outrageous statements. She claimed their relationship wasn't an affair but true love. She said there was nothing wrong since she was divorcing her husband to marry David. She even admitted to harassing me but argued it was my fault for not divorcing David sooner. She blamed me for her jealousy and actions, saying it was all my fault for making her do things she normally wouldn't. Ultimately, after David broke up with her, her anger turned towards me, leading to her making a false phone call claiming Roderick was hospitalized. From her perspective, even that was somehow my fault. To top it off, she winked at me during the mediation, saying,
"Thank you for leaving David."
Of course, her arguments didn't hold, and she was ordered to pay the compensation I demanded in the divorce case. I felt a bit sorry for David, realizing he truly was in a difficult situation. Even her husband demanded compensation in their divorce, but she boldly stated,
"Why should I pay? If anything, I should be receiving compensation for wanting the divorce."
After the lawyer explained it clearly, her face turned pale, and I couldn't help but worry about her future. Seeing her write the agreement and the promissory note as instructed by the lawyer, she looked like a child being scolded by their parent while doing homework. David really got involved with a terrible woman. But I no longer had any desire to help or protect David. Everything was finally settled a few months later. The compensation from the divorce settlement with David and Ainsworth was paid in a lump sum, and with that money, Roderick and I left home and started living together. David quit his job. After the divorce, Ainsworth's advances became more aggressive, and their relationship became public within the company, making it difficult for him to stay there. Ainsworth also quit her job, almost stalking David. Concerned about Ainsworth's actions, David has been staying home more often. Even if he tries to find a new job, at his age, it's unlikely he'll find anyone willing to hire him. How do I know so much about my ex-husband? Well, I started working at a fast food restaurant again. Of course, we still deliver to David's old company. I don't make the deliveries, but my coworkers who do always bring back plenty of gossip. There's nothing scarier than rumors, I thought. Thinking that, I started packing up to leave work. Today is Roderick's turn to cook dinner. Now a high school senior, Roderick decided to attend a culinary school and eagerly prepares meals on his cooking days. Although we sometimes cook together, Roderick's culinary skills never cease to amaze me. Even though I've been a housewife for years, he's more efficient and makes tastier food than I do. Before I knew it, eating Roderick's cooking became the highlight of my day. I wonder what he's making for dinner today. As the city begins to dim and the lights in houses start to flicker on, I walk home. I see the light coming from my house and pick up my pace. There's a different kind of happiness in that room now. Smelling the delicious aroma of Roderick's cooking, I opened the door to our home where he was waiting.
Sarah, there's a burglary happening.
John, my father, shouted in a panic, not realizing that David and Jessica were in the middle of an intimate moment in the basement. He had mistaken their passionate encounter for a break-in and locked the two of them in the room. As John frantically reached for the phone to call the police, I quickly intervened and revealed the shocking truth to him. Upon learning the reality of the situation, John's body trembled with rage, and he decided to summon Michael and the entire family to the basement. I couldn't forgive those two for betraying me. I was determined to make them experience hell. Driven by years of pent-up resentment, I was ready to unleash my wrath upon the unsuspecting couple. My name is Sarah, and I'm a 29-year-old who just got engaged last month. My fiancé, David, was my high school classmate. Although we didn't interact much during our student days, we reconnected after starting our careers. David had joined the workforce before I graduated from college, and he became my mentor at the company, guiding me through my new role.
I never thought you'd end up working at our company, Sarah. You were a top student with a knack for science, so I assumed you'd pursue a career in that field. I had no idea you were interested in publishing,
he said. David was incredibly attentive and dedicated to his work. He patiently taught me the ropes and always had my back whenever I made mistakes. Despite being the same age, he felt like a reliable senior colleague, and I couldn't help but admire his dependability. David, you've really changed. Back in high school, you were more timid and unreliable. But now, you're completely different. You're so dependable that it's hard to believe we're the same age, I remarked. When I first joined the company, I addressed David by his last name. He did the same with me, and no one could have imagined that we would become so close.
Hey, calling me timid is a bit harsh. But I guess I was more introverted back in high school, so I can't blame you for thinking that,
he admitted. Everything changed during the welcome and farewell party for new employees. By chance, David and I ended up sitting next to each other, and he struck up a conversation with me. We bonded over nostalgic memories of our student days and discovered that we shared similar interests. Before we knew it, we started hanging out for drinks after work, and soon enough, we were on a first-name basis. As we spent more time together outside of work, I learned that David had an even greater love for books than I had imagined, and that he once aspired to be a novelist. Remember how I used to sit at my desk and write during breaks in high school? I was working on a novel to submit to publishing companies, he revealed. His words triggered a memory of David being honored at a school assembly. The quiet young man who sat at the edge of the classroom had achieved such an incredible feat. It was impossible not to be drawn to him. I was honored at that assembly because my novel had won the grand prize, he explained. I had never been particularly interested in novels. However, the thought of that shy young man pouring his heart and soul into a piece of writing piqued my curiosity. I wanted to see the work he had dedicated so much time and effort to create. And so, driven by mere curiosity, I decided to read his novel. As I delved into the pages, my perspective was completely transformed. The captivating storyline and the masterful craftsmanship left me utterly spellbound. From that moment on, my perception of him completely changed. I abandoned my plans to pursue a career in science and set my sights on working for a publishing company instead. My twin sister, Jessica, who had been following in my footsteps to study science, relentlessly complained about my decision.
Why did you give up on that major tech company, Sarah? Didn't you say you were considering working there?
She questioned, her voice laced with disbelief and frustration. Unlike me, Jessica was a flashy and attention-seeking individual. She belonged to the popular clique in our class, and I often found myself serving as her plain and unremarkable sidekick.
When you compare Sarah to Jessica, Jessica looks like a total catch.
I overheard our classmates gossiping.
I know, right? She's got a great body, and her face is so stunning that it's hard to believe they're actually twins. Sarah's not bad, but Jessica is just too cute to even notice her.
Another chimed in, their words dripping with admiration for my sister and dismissal of my own appearance.
If I had to choose, I'd definitely go for Jessica. Sarah seems more like a good friend than a girlfriend, you know?
A third voice added, cementing my position as the inferior twin in their eyes. Day after day, I endured being compared to Jessica and treated with disdain. Even our parents favored Jessica for her good looks, and our mother, Emily, was particularly blatant in her preferential treatment. While I could only gain attention through my academic achievements, Jessica was showered with praise for the smallest of actions. A little help with household chores earned her glowing compliments, and a mere smile elicited gushing exclamations of how adorable. I found myself both envious and exasperated by the constant fawning over Jessica. The first time I truly recognized the stark contrast in our treatment was back in elementary school. Since Jessica and I shared the same birthday, we always celebrated together. Everyone would rush to congratulate Jessica, while my own birthday wishes always came as an afterthought. Emily was especially cruel in this regard.
Happy birthday, Jessica! Oh, and you too, Sarah. You should try harder in your studies,
she would say, her words devoid of any genuine warmth towards me. While Jessica basked in the exclusive attention and congratulations from Emily, I was left feeling neglected and yearning for my mother's approval. Determined to earn Emily's praise, I threw myself into my studies with a newfound fervor. Miraculously, I managed to achieve a perfect score on a test, a feat that filled me with pride and hope.
If I show this to Emily, surely she'll,
I thought to myself, my heart swelling with anticipation. That day marked our 10th birthday party, a celebration for both Jessica and me. I figured that if I showed Emily my test results before the party began, I might finally receive the congratulations I so desperately craved before Jessica could steal the spotlight once again. With my chest puffed up with excitement, I made my way to the kitchen, only to be greeted by a shocking scene that stopped me dead in my tracks.
Hey, Mom! Look at this! Jessica got a 90 on the test!
My sister's voice rang out, her tone dripping with pride as she waved her test paper in front of Emily's face. To my utter disbelief, Jessica had beaten me to the punch, presenting her own test results first. Normally, Jessica's grades hovered around or below average, so scoring a 90 was an impressive feat for her. There was no way Emily would pass up the opportunity to shower her with praise. And just like that, the congratulatory words I had longed to hear were bestowed upon Jessica instead, leaving me once again overlooked and overshadowed by my twins' achievements.
Jessica is such a hard worker. Maybe I should add an extra turkey to today's birthday party. Or is there a toy you'd like as a reward? We could go shopping for it on your next day off,
Emily gushed, her eyes sparkling with pride as she lavished praise upon my sister.
Emily, I worked hard on the test too. Look!
I stammered, frantically waving my perfect score in front of her face, desperate for a shred of recognition. But the moment Emily's gaze fell upon my test, the smile vanished from her face, replaced by a cold, stern expression that sent shivers down my spine.
Don't get carried away with something like that. Studying is the only thing you're good at, so it's only natural that you can achieve this much, right? What are you getting so excited about? You should consider a perfect score as the norm. Don't come reporting to me every single time,
she snapped, her words cutting through me like a knife. Shocked and at a loss for words, I stood there, my heart sinking into the depths of despair. At the same time, a burning hatred for Jessica began to consume me from within. We were supposed to be twins, yet Jessica was praised so easily while I was treated as if my accomplishments were nothing more than a given, met with cold, dismissive glances. Why was I the only one who had to endure this kind of treatment? Frustrated and resentful beyond words, I couldn't bring myself to celebrate my own birthday, instead retreating to my room and crying my eyes out. In those moments of darkness, my only support came from John, our father, who had become a doctor. John had established his own medical practice around the time I entered middle school and continues to work as a physician to this day.
Sarah, just focus on doing what you love at your own pace. You don't have to listen to what your dad or mom say about your life, you know?
He reassured me, his words a soothing balm to my wounded soul. In the comforting embrace of John's arms, I finally let go of all the pain and sorrow I had been holding back, sobbing uncontrollably as I poured my heart out to him. As long as I had John by my side, I decided that would be enough. I resolved to stop seeking love and approval from Emily, steeling my heart against any further disappointment. It was in that moment of clarity that John's voice interrupted my thoughts.
Sarah, take a look at this. There were dandelions blooming by the side of the road. Isn't that amazing?
He exclaimed, his eyes wide with childlike wonder. You see, John had a tendency to be quite out of touch with common sense. He would confidently point at a sunflower and call it a dandelion, or spot a coyote and shout about a squirrel sighting. He just had a way of being on a completely different wavelength from everyone else. But it was that very quirkiness that never failed to bring a smile to my face, even in my darkest moments. However, Jessica would always glare at us with envious eyes, unable to stand the sight of my happiness. She had a habit of coveting and taking away anything that belonged to me. Consumed by a fierce jealousy whenever I possessed something better than her. This ugly truth became glaringly apparent to me during my middle school years. At the time, I had started dating a boyfriend who was way out of my league in terms of his impressive qualities. He was academically brilliant and excelled in sports, the kind of guy I never thought would give me a second glance. When he confessed his feelings for me, I was so shocked that I thought I must be dreaming. I fell for you because of how diligently you studied, even during breaks. While everyone else was goofing around, you ignored them and kept working hard. I thought that was really cool. I didn't want to lose to someone like you, Sarah, so I've been studying like crazy to maintain my grades. He admitted, his cheeks flushed with embarrassment as he shared his admiration for me. His words filled my heart with a warm, fuzzy feeling, and I couldn't help but fall even deeper in love with him. Thanks to his influence, I finally learned to embrace and appreciate the studious side of myself. I vowed to cherish and treasure our relationship, determined to make it work. But just as I was basking in the glow of our newfound happiness, Jessica had to come along and ruin everything. I'm sorry. I kissed Jessica. My boyfriend confessed, his voice heavy with guilt and regret. His sudden confession left me speechless, my mind reeling as I struggled to process the words that had just left his lips. As I stood there, grasping for a coherent response, Jessica stepped in between us, shielding him from my inevitable wrath.
It's not his fault. I couldn't help but fall for him. I just couldn't let him go. So please, don't blame him. If you want to blame someone, blame me.
She pleaded, her voice laced with a sickening sweetness that made my stomach churn. No, Jessica, this is all on me. Sarah, I'm so sorry. I think we should break up. He interjected, his words twisting the knife that had already been plunged into my heart. The entire situation reeked of a poorly staged performance, a charade designed to mask their betrayal. Blinded by my own pain, I failed to notice the triumphant smirk that played across Jessica's lips as she reveled in my suffering. Unable to bear another moment in their presence, I turned on my heel and fled, my feet carrying me as far away from them as possible. For weeks afterward, I couldn't bring myself to set foot in school. The thought of seeing them together in the same classroom, of having to pretend that everything was fine, was more than I could bear. It wasn't until I had finally managed to regain some semblance of composure that I found the strength to return. As fate would have it, I overheard a conversation between Jessica and our classmates that shattered any remaining illusions I might have had. "Damn, Jessica's a real piece of work, stealing her sister's boyfriend like that. Who does that? That's just messed up," one of them remarked, his voice dripping with disgust.
But it pissed me off, you know? Like, how could Sarah, with her inferior looks, manage to snag such a high-quality boyfriend? It just didn't sit right with me,
Jessica retorted, her words laced with venom.
I mean, Jessica's way cuter and prettier. That's the only reason I took him. If he had noticed Jessica from the start, there's no way he would have fallen for Sarah.
Another classmate chimed in, her tone laced with a cruel amusement. "Dude, she's scary. I don't ever want to get on her bad side." A third voice added, a nervous chuckle punctuating his words. As I watched Jessica laughing crudely with the boys, a sense of utter despair washed over me. It was clear that she had never truly cared for him at all. Her actions had been driven by nothing more than pure jealousy, a spiteful desire to rob me of the happiness I had found. I tried to tell my ex-boyfriend the truth, to make him see the kind of person Jessica really was. But he refused to listen, instead choosing to confront Jessica with my accusations. From that moment on, until the day I graduated middle school, I found myself the target of Jessica's relentless bullying and harassment. I had hoped that graduation would finally grant me the freedom I so desperately craved. But just as I was beginning to allow myself to dream of a brighter future, a new wave of despair came crashing down upon me. Jessica, it seemed, had decided to enroll in the same high school as me. Despite her initial plans to attend a different school, she had somehow caught wind of my choice and, like a malevolent shadow, had followed me there. My ex-boyfriend, who had chosen to attend a different high school, had outlived his usefulness and been promptly discarded by Jessica. From that point on, I resigned myself to a life of mediocrity, going through the motions day after day with no real sense of purpose or drive. It wasn't until I witnessed David's unwavering dedication and passion that something began to stir within me once more. Thanks to his influence, I found the courage to pursue my dreams, and to my amazement, I was offered a position at the publishing company I had always aspired to work for. Emily was furious when she learned that I had changed my career path without her consent, but John's intervention saved me from being thrown out of the house altogether. As my savings grew and my relationship with David blossomed, I finally felt ready to break free from Jessica's toxic influence once and for all. With David by my side, I took the leap and started a new chapter in my life, moving out on my own and leaving the past behind me. And so, after 5 years of being together, David and I decided to get engaged. When I introduced him to my parents to seek their blessing, their response was even more enthusiastic than I had anticipated. Emily, in particular, took an immediate liking to David, and the two of them engaged in lively conversation, their laughter filling the house with a warmth that had been absent for far too long. As they chatted away merrily, Jessica sat in the corner, her eyes narrowed in jealousy as she watched the joyful scene unfold before her. From that day forward, David became a frequent visitor to our home. My parents grew to love him like a true son, and he was even invited to join our extended family gatherings for Christmas.
Why don't we invite David's parents and relatives too? My dad and mom love having a big, lively crowd around, so I'm sure they'd be thrilled.
John suggested, his eyes twinkling with excitement. My paternal grandmother, who had been running a restaurant, had recently announced that she would be closing down the business that winter. As a final hurrah, the entire family had planned to come together for one last celebration, a Christmas party that would double as a tribute to my grandparents and all they had accomplished. Initially, David's parents had been hesitant to join, not wanting to impose, but with a little encouragement from my grandparents, they eventually agreed to come along. With David's relatives also in attendance, that year's Christmas party was a grand affair, filled with more people than ever before. Do you think we have enough drinks? If we run out, I can always make a quick run to the store. Just make sure to tell David and the others not to hold back, okay? Emily fretted, her brow furrowed with concern.
It's all right, Emily. I heard some of David's relatives are bringing plenty of their own drinks, so there's no need to worry.
I reassured her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. Having only ever had serious conversations with Emily about my studies, I found myself feeling nervous at the prospect of engaging in casual chatter with her. But as my relationship with David deepened, Emily began to take a more active interest in my life, and we found ourselves talking more and more. It was through these conversations that I discovered just how much of a worrier Emily truly was. Despite having meticulously planned every detail in advance, she would still find herself fretting and fussing on the day of the event, her nerves getting the better of her. Seeing this unexpected side of her helped to ease some of the tension I had always felt in her presence. On the day of the party, Emily was her usual restless self, bustling about as she made last-minute preparations. As I worked alongside her, she suddenly paused and smiled wistfully.
Come to think of it, you were always right there by my side, worrying about me.
She mused, her voice tinged with nostalgia.
What?
I asked, caught off guard by her sudden declaration. As I stood there, stunned by her words, Emily's expression shifted to one of bittersweet sadness as she began to recount tales from our past.
Even though I scolded you every day, you never let it get you down. You'd always come to me and ask, "Hey Mom, is there anything I can help with?" while Jessica was off playing somewhere.
She reminisced, her eyes distant as she lost herself in the memories.
You spent more time by my side than you did playing. I realized then that I was making you worry about me. I knew I was being cold to you, Sarah. I knew I was doing a terrible thing.
She confessed, her voice heavy with regret. As Emily spoke, abruptly pouring her heart out to me while preparing the steaks, I listened in silence, absorbing every word.
At first, I was strict with Jessica. She was the older sister, but she was always taking things from you, wasn't she? Your birthday presents, your snacks, anything she could get her hands on. I couldn't let her keep doing that to you.
She explained, her eyes filling with a fierce protectiveness.
There was a time when I was really hard on her. But the harsher I was with Jessica, the worse she treated you.
She revealed, her voice trembling with emotion. Her words hit me like a bombshell. As I thought back, I remembered how, in the beginning, Emily would fix Jessica with a stern glare whenever she stole one of my toys. There were even a few times when she scolded her right in front of me. But then, at some point, it all stopped abruptly, and before I knew it, I had become the target of Emily's ire. Instead of trying to reason with the disobedient Jessica, Emily had chosen to restrain me, to keep me out of harm's way. She had taken advantage of my docile nature, she admitted, her voice heavy with pain and regret.
I'm sorry, Sarah. I've been a terrible mother, putting you through so much pain and suffering.
Emily whispered, her voice heavy with regret and sincerity. As I listened to her explanation and heard her apology for the first time, tears welled up in my eyes, threatening to spill over at any moment. Seeing my emotional state, Emily paused in her work and asked me to wait for a moment before disappearing into our grandmother's room. When she returned, she held something in her hands, presenting it to me with a tenderness that caught me off guard. As my gaze fell upon the item she held, the tears I had been holding back burst forth, streaming down my face as I struggled to comprehend the reality before me.
This is the first perfect score you ever got on a test, back when you were in elementary school. Do you remember? You went out of your way to show it to me on your birthday. I was so proud of you then, even if I didn't show it.
Emily revealed, her voice trembling with emotion.
You had never tried to seek praise or attention before, but that day, you took the initiative to express yourself. This test is a precious treasure to me,
she continued, clutching the paper to her chest as tears gathered in her own eyes. Keeping it at home risked Jessica discovering and potentially destroying it. So Emily had entrusted our grandparents with safeguarding this precious memento. Learning this truth, I finally allowed myself to break down, sobbing into Emily's embrace like a child seeking comfort. The realization that I had been loved so deeply all along. That Emily had been watching over me and supporting me in her own way. And the struggles she had faced as a mother, it all came crashing down on me in that moment. I felt a profound sense of gratitude for having the opportunity to hear Emily's true feelings before embarking on my own marriage. With the air cleared between us, I thought the Christmas party would conclude without any further incidents. As the festivities wound down and the guests began to succumb to the effects of alcohol, I noticed Jessica slipping out of the banquet hall, trailing after David, who had excused himself to use the restroom. A sense of unease settled in the pit of my stomach, urging me to follow them, but before I could make a move, Michael called out to me, inviting me to join him for a drink. Unable to refuse his request, I found myself trapped, forced to spend some time indulging in beer with Michael and his companions. After a while, I seized the opportunity to escape when Michael and the others got up to refill their glasses, making my way out of the banquet hall in search of David and Jessica. To my surprise, despite supposedly heading to the restroom, there was no sign of them on the first floor. The third floor housed our grandparents' private residence, and the door was securely locked. There were no restrooms on the second floor, leaving only one possible location. Puzzled by their absence, I began to explore the area, my mind racing with possibilities.
So, what do you think? I'm the better woman, aren't I?
It was then that I heard Jessica's voice drifting up from the stairwell leading to the kitchen. The stairs by the kitchen led down to the basement, where the wine cellar was located. Jessica typically avoided alcohol, so what could she possibly be doing in the wine cellar? Moreover, I could hear another voice mingling with hers, indicating that she wasn't alone. Suspicion gnawing at my mind, I made my way down to the basement, only to be greeted by a conversation that left me reeling in disbelief.
David should just be honest with himself. Everyone else already prefers me over Sarah, so why fight it?
Jessica's voice echoed, filled with a smug confidence.
Wait, no. We can't. If Sarah finds out about this.
David's panicked protest reached my ears, his words laced with fear and guilt.
After everything we've done, you're going to back out now? You can't just let a woman like me go this far and then leave me hanging. Are you trying to humiliate me? Or maybe you're into the whole forceful thing?
Jessica taunted, her voice dripping with a dangerous allure. The voice I heard alongside Jessica's belonged to none other than David. Unable to process the unbelievable situation unfolding before me, I stood frozen in front of the door, my mind reeling with shock and disbelief. I knew I needed to see for myself, to confirm what was happening inside, but the fear of what I might discover kept me rooted to the spot, unable to muster the courage to push the door open. Gradually, the sound of Jessica's nasally voice and David's heavy breathing grew louder, and a wave of despair washed over me, plunging my world into darkness. The David I had trusted so completely, the man I had placed all my faith in, was no different from my ex-boyfriend in the end. He had succumbed to Jessica's scheming, just as she had planned all along. Faced with this harsh reality, any love I had felt for him evaporated in an instant.
In the end, David is just like the rest of them.
I muttered to myself, a hollow smile playing across my lips as I sank to the ground, my legs no longer able to support my weight. I had truly believed that David loved me unconditionally, that his devotion to me was unshakable, but here he was, so easily ensnared by Jessica's charms. It was pathetic, really, and I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of it all. It seemed that no matter who they were, the moment Jessica entered the picture, men were helpless to resist her allure. No one truly cared about me, no one valued me for who I was. With that realization, a single tear slipped down my cheek, a stark contrast to the empty smile that still lingered on my face. Steeling my resolve, I slowly pushed the door open, confirming with my own eyes the scene I had already imagined in my mind. The two of them were so lost in their passionate embrace that they failed to notice my presence, their bodies tangled together in a sickening display of betrayal. Fighting back the bile that rose in my throat, I reached for my phone with trembling hands. Aiming the camera in their direction, I captured the damning evidence of their affair, recording every moment of their betrayal before fleeing the scene and locking myself in the nearest restroom. As I struggled to keep my composure, I silently congratulated myself for having the foresight to gather proof, my mind already racing with thoughts of what to do next. It was then that John emerged from the direction of the basement, his face etched with panic as he rushed towards me.
"Sarah, there's a burglary happening!"
he exclaimed, grabbing me by the shoulders as he blurted out his shocking revelation. Utterly baffled by his sudden outburst, I tried to calm him down and make sense of the situation, prompting him to explain further.
Emily said she wanted some wine, so she asked me to fetch a bottle from the wine cellar. I remembered we had some vintage wines stored down there. But when I went to the basement just now, I heard some strange noises.
He rambled, his words tumbling out in a frantic rush.
"Our restaurant is closed, so I thought it must be a burglar who snuck in to steal our wine, thinking no one would be around. I locked the door from the outside to trap them inside, so let's call the police. I'll go tell Emily and the others."
John continued, his voice rising with each word. In his panicked state, John had failed to realize that the burglars he had trapped in the basement were none other than David and Jessica. But for me, this turn of events worked in my favor. Knowing that the two of them were now trapped and unable to easily escape, I stopped John from calling the police and instead filled him in on what I had just witnessed. Together, we returned to the banquet hall to share this shocking revelation with the rest of the family. An hour later, as David and Jessica finally finished their sordid affair and attempted to leave the basement, they found themselves faced with an unexpected obstacle.
"What the? The door won't open,"
Jessica muttered, her brow furrowing in confusion.
"What?"
David replied, his voice laced with a growing sense of unease. Realizing that they had been locked inside, the two of them began to panic, their voices rising in a frantic cacophony of fear and desperation. Seizing the moment, I flung the door open with a force that startled them both, my eyes blazing with a fury that could no longer be contained.
"David, what the hell do you think you're doing?"
As the two of them emerged from the wine cellar, they were greeted by the sight of Michael and the rest of the family, all glaring at them with a mixture of shock and disgust.
"Dad? What are you doing here?"
Jessica stammered, her face draining of color as she took in the sea of angry faces before her.
"Don't give me that bullshit.
What the hell were you doing in there? Michael roared, his voice shaking with barely contained rage. Judging by their ashen faces, it was clear that neither Jessica nor David had anticipated the entire family gathering outside the room the moment they stepped out. Unable to comprehend the gravity of the situation, they simply stood there, opening and closing their mouths like fish out of water, unable to utter a single word in their defense. How do you plan on explaining this situation? Don't even think about trying to claim that nothing happened, because we won't buy it. I said coldly, my words cutting through the tense silence like a knife. At the sound of my voice, Jessica's head snapped in my direction, her eyes narrowing into a venomous glare. What the hell is going on here? Are you the one who locked us in the wine cellar? She demanded, her tone dripping with accusation, as if I were the villain in this twisted scenario. Despite the anger bubbling up inside me at her audacity to play the victim, I kept my composure, crossing my arms and looking down at her with a mixture of pity and disdain. Don't get it twisted. It was John who locked the door, not me. I only heard about the situation from him. More importantly, what were you two doing down here in the first place? I questioned, my voice laced with a sickening sweetness. You were cozied up together in the wine cellar for over an hour. Could it be that you were engaging in some suspicious activities? I pressed on, relishing in the way their faces paled even further at my insinuation.
What? What the hell are you talking about? Stop making baseless accusations. David mentioned he was interested in wine, so I was just showing him around and unlocking the room.
Jessica stammered, her words tumbling out in a panicked rush as she tried to defend herself against my allegations. Hearing her flimsy excuse, a bold, fearless smile spread across my face as I stepped closer to her, my eyes glinting with a wicked satisfaction.
Oh, is that so? That's strange because I was under the impression that David hated wine.
I mused, my voice dripping with mock confusion.
What?
Jessica breathed, her eyes widening in shock as the realization began to dawn on her.
He tried it once a long time ago and couldn't stand the taste. Since then, he can't even handle the smell of it. He's even complained about it to my parents before.
I explained, my words driving the final nail into her coffin of lies. Trapped by her own deceit, Jessica began to panic, her face growing paler by the second as she struggled to come up with another excuse. Beside her, David was visibly sweating, his brow furrowed in concentration as he desperately tried to think of a way to talk his way out of this mess. Unwilling to let them off the hook so easily, I pulled out my phone, ready to deliver the final blow that would shatter any remaining hope they had of escaping this unscathed.
If you had been honest from the start, maybe things would be different. But since you're so determined to lie your way out of this, I guess I have no choice.
Do you know what this is? I asked, my voice dripping with a sickening sweetness.
That's...
Jessica gasped, her eyes widening in horror as she realized what I was holding.
What the...
David choked out, his face draining of color as he stared at the screen in disbelief. There, playing on my phone, was a video of the two of them engaged in their earlier tryst. Their passionate moans and cries of ecstasy filling the air as their faces were clearly visible in the footage. Faced with irrefutable evidence of their betrayal, the two of them completely lost their composure, descending into a full-blown panic. Reveling in their misery, I couldn't help but laugh at their pathetic display, my words dripping with a mocking provocation.
I thought you said you were just showing him the wine. What exactly is going on here? I'm just a dumb girl, so I don't really understand.
Hey, big sis, care to enlighten me? What were you two doing down here? I asked, my voice laced with a sickening sweetness.
No, it's not what it looks like. David forced me into it. He lured me down here and took advantage of me.
Jessica blurted out, quickly turning on David and painting him as the sole perpetrator now that she realized there was no way to deny what had happened. David, caught off guard by her sudden betrayal, opened his mouth to defend himself. And soon the two of them were engaged in a vicious back and forth, each trying to shift the blame onto the other.
That's not true. When I went to use the restroom, Jessica followed me and dragged me down here. She kept saying that she's liked me long before Sarah did and started coming on to me. She even started taking her clothes off on her own.
David shouted, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and desperation.
I tried to refuse at first, but then she threatened me, saying, "Are you trying to humiliate me?" I didn't know what to do. I couldn't bring myself to push her away, and before I knew it, things had gone too far.
He rambled on, his words tumbling out in a frantic rush.
I'm so sorry, Sarah. It was a momentary lapse in judgment. I deeply regret what I've done. Please forgive me.
David pleaded, tears streaming down his face as he begged for my forgiveness. Seeing him reduced to such a pitiful state, my expression twisted in pain, and the words I had been holding back finally spilled from my lips. I trusted you. I whispered, my voice barely audible over the sound of my own heart shattering into a million pieces.
What?
David asked, his eyes widening in shock as he struggled to process the weight of my words. I thought David was different. I believed he only had eyes for me. I whispered, my voice trembling with the weight of my shattered dreams.
I'm so sorry, Sarah. This is all my fault.
David mumbled, his head down in shame as he pressed his forehead against the ground, repeating his apologies over and over again, as if the mere act of groveling could somehow erase the pain he had caused. But with each apology that fell from his lips, I could feel my heart growing colder, the last embers of my love for him fading into nothingness. No matter how much he begged, I knew I could never bring myself to feel the same way about him again.
If you cared about me at all, you would have cherished me and resisted Jessica's advances, no matter what.
I said softly, my words laced with a bitter disappointment that cut deeper than any knife.
I only love you, Sarah. Please believe me. You're the most important person in my life.
David pleaded, his voice cracking with desperation as he reached out to me, his hands trembling with the weight of his guilt.
Shut up, you disgraceful piece of shit!
Michael roared, slapping David's outstretched hand away with a force that sent him stumbling backward. Michael was a man of unwavering integrity, fiercely loyal to his wife and utterly disgusted by infidelity and any form of promiscuity. The fact that his own son had stooped to such deplorable behavior was more than he could bear. With a face twisted in rage, he fixed David with a glare that could have frozen hell itself, his words dripping with venom as he tore into him without mercy.
No matter what your reasons may be, to make the person you claim to love suffer like this. You're a failure as a husband and as a man. Someone who can't even cherish one woman has no right to speak of love.
Michael bellowed, his voice shaking with barely contained fury.
That's right. Do you even understand the gravity of what you've done?
Another relative chimed in, their words laced with disgust and condemnation.
To think you could still utter such words after we've seen this. You've got some nerve.
A third voice added, their tone dripping with disdain. As Michael's family joined in the chorus of condemnation, their voices rising in a cacophony of anger and disappointment, it became clear that they shared his intolerance for deception and betrayal. Perhaps it was because Michael himself was so steadfastly against straying from the righteous path that he found David's weakness in the face of another woman's advances so utterly unforgivable. Faced with the full weight of his family's fury, David crumpled under the onslaught of their words, collapsing to the ground in a pathetic heap as he struggled to find the words to defend himself.
That's right. Even if I was the one who approached him, none of this would have happened if David had just firmly rejected me."
Jessica interjected, her voice dripping with a sickening sweetness that made my stomach churn.
"The problem isn't that I made a move on him, but that he was too weak to refuse me. You should be reflecting on your own shortcomings, not blaming others. I was only trying to test the depth of your love for Sarah,"
she continued, her words so utterly divorced from reality that everyone present could only stare at her in disbelief, their eyes wide with shock at the sheer audacity of her claims.
"What the hell are you saying?"
I asked, my voice barely above a whisper as I struggled to wrap my mind around the utter nonsense spewing from her mouth. In response, Jessica reached out and grasped my hand, her eyes shining with a twisted sort of pride as she spoke, as if she truly believed she had been acting in my best interests all along.
"Sarah, I'm so sorry. If only I had realized sooner what a fickle man David was, I could have spared you this heartache. I never imagined he could be such a spineless, pathetic excuse for a human being,"
she cooed, her voice dripping with false sympathy that made my skin crawl.
"From now on, I'll be the one to find you a man truly worthy of your love. So promise me you won't fall for any more trash like him, okay? Just listen to what I say, and everything will be fine,"
she continued, her words so utterly delusional that I could feel my patience wearing thinner with each passing second. Just as I was about to open my mouth to put her in her place, a dull thud echoed through the wine cellar, the sound of flesh striking flesh with a force that left everyone stunned.
"Don't you dare pretend you were doing this for Sarah's sake. How dare you spout such utter bullshit?"
Emily roared, her hand still raised from the slap she had just delivered to Jessica's face. Jessica stood there, her mouth agape as she cradled her reddened cheek, too shocked by the sudden pain to utter a single word in her own defense. But Emily was far from finished, her eyes blazing with a fury that I had never seen before as she continued to tear into my sister without mercy.
"Acting for Sarah's benefit? Don't make me laugh. You've never done a single thing for her sake in your entire life. To think you could do something so despicable and still try to shift the blame onto others."
She seethed, her words dripping with a venom that left Jessica trembling in the face of her wrath.
"No one is buying your lies anymore. I won't let you pull a stunt like this ever again. From now on, I'll be the one protecting Sarah. So do us all a favor and stay the hell away from her,"
Emily declared, her voice ringing with a fierce protectiveness that brought tears to my eyes. It was the first time I had ever seen her unleash such raw, unbridled anger on Jessica, the first time she had stood up for me so clearly and unequivocally. Overwhelmed by the sheer force of her love and the depth of her commitment to my well-being, I couldn't help but choke back a sob, my heart swelling with a gratitude that I had never known before.
"What do you mean, you're trying to act like a proper mother now after being so harsh on Sarah all this time? Just because the relatives are watching, you're putting on a good face. I'm the way I am because you pampered me, and I can't measure my worth any other way because you kept comparing me to Sarah. Stop acting like you're not at fault."
Emily, shocked by these words, looked taken aback, and John stepped in front of Jessica to protect Emily.
"You're right, we might have raised you the wrong way. But did Emily ever say it was okay for you to do this? Do you think Sarah would be happy seeing you act like this? Every time you get scolded, you use someone as a shield to escape getting hurt. You're just a coward, always running away, blaming others. Everything you're facing now is because of what you've sown."
It was the first time John yelled at her, and Jessica, trembling in fear. I had never heard such a low, intimidating voice from John, who usually seemed out of touch with common sense. Even I was taken aback, and my tears stopped.
You've crossed a line that shouldn't be crossed as a human. You will be punished accordingly.
Punished? Seeing John's serious expression, Jessica trembled, wondering what he would say.
From now on, we won't take care of you. You are banned from contacting any relatives. There is no one in this house to help you anymore. Live on your own. Never show your face again.
What? Jessica was speechless at this unexpected statement. The relatives nodded in agreement with John's words.
I've already talked to everyone. You have no allies left. Pack your things and leave this house immediately. No, wait! I have nowhere to go! I don't care. If you're saying it's our fault for pampering you, then we'll treat you harshly from now on. So leave. Never come back to this house.
Wait. Please. Sarah, I'm sorry. I won't do this again. I'm reflecting on my actions. So please, convince Dad and Mom. Don't abandon me. We're the only twin sisters. I don't want such a sad farewell. Please, forgive me? Realizing the gravity of the situation, Jessica cried and apologized, desperately clinging to my sleeve. But my feelings didn't waver, and I shook off her hand.
It's too late to cry now. It's disgusting. I've never thought of you as my sister, not even for a moment.
What?
Neither you nor David should ever appear before me again. If you do, I'll make you see hell. And I'll definitely demand compensation in court from both of you. Don't think you can get away with this by crying. Wait. Please, Sarah. Listen to me.
Hearing about the court compensation, Jessica turned pale and desperately reached out to stop me. But my parents blocked her path, and Michael and the relatives glared at her, all of them giving her cold stares. Seeing this, she seemed to give up, and with a powerless drop of her head, I left the scene. Thus, I ended my engagement with David and cut off my sisterly ties with Jessica. After that, I sued Jessica for compensation. As John declared, Jessica was disowned. She was also criticized by all the relatives, which must have taken a toll on her mentally. She didn't talk back. However, when it came time to actually kick her out, she seemed to realize the seriousness and kept begging for forgiveness in front of the house. But no one listened to Jessica's pleas, and the neighbors, disturbed by the noise, called the police. When Jessica heard the police sirens, she got scared and fled the house, seeking refuge at a friend's place. Learning about this, I decided to spread the incident among our classmates and acquaintances to further corner her. I gave her a taste of her own medicine. Consequently, those who knew the details stopped sheltering Jessica, labeled her as a person lacking compassion, and severed ties with her. Jessica is now reportedly living a poor life in the mountains of Dallas. David, too, faced cold stares from high school classmates and lost his friendships. Everyone treated him with caution, keeping their distance to avoid any trouble. Moreover, news of the broken engagement spread among his colleagues, making it awkward for him to continue working, so he quit his job in haste. Lacking any particular skills, he's now struggling to find a new job. However, I have no intention of forgiving him. I sued him for compensation, including the cancellation fee for the wedding venue I had booked, and with Michael's help, I now receive monthly payments into my account. Thus, I succeeded in clearing my ties with both of them. I left the apartment I was living in alone and returned to my parents' house, living happily with them. Hey, Sarah. How about this? I think it would look good on you.
Mom, I'm already 30. Just because I couldn't wear it as a child, don't bring clothes with teddy bear patches.
Rather, where did you even find that? I'm surprised they make such things for adults. Emily started filling in the lost time with me, and John smiled warmly as he watched us. Seeing the smiles of those two became my happiness.